Stick with me, because you and I are about to see something bloody incredible. It's been 3 days since I buried my old man, Ryan Lewika. I've been running around like a madman trying to fix his mess.
And honestly, it's an absolute disaster. I'm the lord of the Lewika territory now, but there's absolutely nothing grand about it.
The land is dirt poor, the food's basic, and not a single merchant wants to come out here for one simple reason.
There's nothing worth a damn. We've got a few mineral veins, but they're impossible to mine.
To top it all off, the Nens Kingdom is full of aggro warriors, and bandits just waltz right across the borders whenever they please. I can't afford to hire soldiers, so security's non-existent. No cash means no protection, and without money you can forget about having any troops. It's a bloody vicious cycle. I put my quill down and sighed. Normally, a noble lord would have an administrator to handle.
Help out with all this paperwork, but we're way too broke to hire anyone.
My dad's funeral took my very last gold coin. But all is not lost. I've got a secret.
I'm actually from Earth. I reincarnated into this world, and I've got a super special ability. Young master, please have some tea. That's Ulu, my personal maid.
She's been by my side since we were kids. She set the tea on the table, and her white skirt swayed.
Gently, and honestly, I've got to admit, she's grown up really well. Now, this is where you and I need to pay attention. Suddenly, a panel popped up. Ulu, Martial Force 10. Strategy 73, Loyalty 100.
Rank C, and this panel is my secret ability.
This world's got magic and alchemy, but no one's ever seen a status screen like in a video game. Martial Force reflects her pure physical power and agility.
Strategy measures her intelligence and magic affinity, and her loyalty, well, it's maxed out at a solid 100.
She's completely devoted to me. I took a sip of the red tea, and even with everything falling apart, the taste reminded me that noble life has its massive perks.
Young master, are you all right? Ulu asked softly.
Everyone in the territory calls me my lord now, but she still calls me young master. As usual, she knows just how bad things are.
If we can't pay our soldiers soon, even our last guard of 100 men will bail on us. I'm fine, I answered straight away. I've got this sort of father-in-law, Lord Phaedra, who rules right over in the neighbouring territory.
I've seen him heaps of times and always just called him uncle.
He'd always smile, telling me to come to him if I ever needed urgent help. But now that my dad's dead, honestly, I don't know how much weight that old kindness still holds.
I'm not pinning too much hope on him at all.
Then I remembered the Grand Storehouse, the place where every generation of Lewika family heads hoarded all their belongings. Maybe there'd be something actually valuable in there.
The storehouse was covered in cobwebs and absolutely packed with junk, old paintings and vases. I bet you're thinking exactly what I'm thinking. Pure rubbish they bought at sky-high prices just to show off their status. Most of this crap was completely worthless. A famous painting bought for 50 gold coins would be pure luck if it sold for 10 silver.
The nobility is all about appearances, and that depends on status, not good taste. I silently cursed my ancestors' bloody awful spending habits.
I unsheathed this supposedly elegant noble sword, but it was completely rusted over. Pure facade with no real substance. I chucked it straight into a wooden crate and instead picked up something covered in dust. It had a spectacular eagle engraved on it. It was a silvery grey tone. There was something about it that felt super familiar to me. Inside, I found a heavy medallion made of pure gold. A beautifully carved gladiator emblem with a golden eagle. Now this was bloody exciting. Norrance is a kingdom that worships pure strength. And every year they hold a massive epic tournament. Nobles, commoners, and even other races come to watch it all, though only legal citizens of Norwens are allowed to compete.
The grand winner scores this emblem and with it gets free services at any small shop across the entire kingdom.
Massive discounts at the big merchants, and the most insane part, the right to ask a reasonable favour from the king himself. This was, without a doubt, the most valuable thing in my entire storehouse.
My granddad Edward had won it. Back in his day, he was the greatest sword saint in the whole empire. Though in this era, where battle aura has completely faded away, that legendary title doesn't really carry as much real weight anymore.
He died fighting years ago, and my dad inherited the lordship at just 16, exactly like I have now. I shivered just thinking about it. Is everyone doomed to this? Are the Lewika men destined to die young? I silently swore to have kids way later on, not anytime soon. Those free perks were only for the original owner and expired with my granddad.
Now, all that's left is its display value and the royal favour. Honestly, if this bloody crest could get me 1,000 gold coins, I'd hand it over right now without a second thought. Other nobles treat this like some ultra-sacred honour, but I'm inches away from losing my last squad of guards because I can't afford to pay them.
You and I both know that honour doesn't feel empty stomachs. Butler, get the carriage ready. The old man hurried off.
Come along and let's dive into this story. He took one look at the box and instantly recognised Grandpa Edward's crest. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something else, but in the end he just nodded. Yes, my lord, I'll have your carriage ready right away, without fail. Before we set off for the royal capital, Lulu prepped my formal suit with so much care. She smoothed out every last wrinkle with her small, pale hands. She gently placed the noble hat on my head. As she leaned in close, I caught her sweet, lovely scent. That gentle touch was a really sweet detail. After that, I gave the butler his final orders. The trip to the capital was going to take us at least 2 or 3 weeks. It was a fair way from home. I hopped into the carriage, which had the imposing Luica family crest engraved right on it. Of course, Lulu came with me. She is my personal maid, after all. She follows me absolutely everywhere. On our way to the capital, we'd be crossing through the Phaedra family's territory. In fact, that was our very first stop. If Baron Phaedra decided to lend a hand, maybe I wouldn't have to give up my late grandfather's precious emblem. Not that I'm overly attached to it, but keeping a family heirloom is always the way to go if you can manage it. The kingdom of Norwans has absolutely massive lands, but the soil is bone dry. Barely anything grows out there, though they've got heaps of mineral wealth. The neighbouring kingdoms of Jade and Rima import Norwans minerals non-stop, at least when there's peace. Crossing over into Phaedra's lands, the difference was night and day. Our place was pretty humble, but Baron Phaedra had entire fields and orchards right at his fingertips. For a simple baron, that is just filthy rich. Along the dusty country roads, I spotted a few scattered farmers and the odd travelling merchant with an old donkey or horse. In the end, we arrived safe and sound at the Phaedra mansion. I set my coachman Oxyu on ahead to announce my arrival. Rocking up unannounced is a massive slap of disrespect among nobles, but both our families had a pretty decent relationship back when my dad was alive. Pay attention now, because this is where it all goes south. I was dead wrong. Oxio came back looking super awkward, nervously glancing around. What happened? I asked, even though I'd already guessed the worst. My lord, the butler booted me out, Oxio stammered. He said I was faking being a noble's coachman. Lulu was absolutely fuming. Phaedra's butler knows exactly who Oxio is. He drove for his father heaps of times. I kept my cool. I figured out straight away that, plain and simple, they just didn't want to see my face. I underestimated how fast people turn their backs on you when someone dies. Let's go, Oxyu. Straight to the capital. I didn't say another bloody word. That butler would never turn away a visiting baron without direct orders from his master. Even my coachman represents the image of the Luica territory. This was a completely calculated insult.
Lulu barely opened her mouth for the rest of the trip. She was just boiling with pure rage.
To her, Phaedra's daughter was engaged to me, and even so, they didn't even let us through the front gates. It was a real slap in the face, and she took it incredibly personally. As we made our way towards the grand capital, the towns and territories looked way more well off. By the time we finally made it to the royal city, we were greeted by massive stone walls and wide paved roads. The contrast with our muddy tracks was insane. Buildings of all shapes and sizes absolutely packed the massive city.
After getting through the guards' strict inspection at the gates, we reached the side wing of the towering royal palace.
The clerk at the registration desk looked me up and down and spotted my baron's badge. Just a lowly noble wanting to see the king. Normally, they'd look for any cheap excuse to send you packing. Name, Lingwei Luica. Purpose, a private audience with His Majesty. Ready for the plot twist? I whipped out my gladiator emblem. That golden eagle made the clerk's eyes nearly pop right out of his head. A gladiator emblem? Esteemed sir, how may I help you? His tone of voice did a complete 180. Anyone holding a gladiator emblem with the golden eagle had to be tied to a seriously powerful noble house. That tournament is the biggest event in all of Norwans. Only one emblem is handed out each year, and since the kingdom was founded, they've barely given out a few hundred.
I wish to have an audience with His Majesty. Of course, I will notify our king right away.
Please wait here. There were no more pointless questions. The clerk came rushing back in just a few minutes. I hadn't even had time to finish my tea. Esteemed sir, His Majesty is waiting for you in the side lounge.
I nodded and left Lulu behind.
Taking a maid before the king would be a massive show of disrespect. This was the first time I was laying eyes on the great ruler of Norwans.
He wasn't as young as I'd pictured him. A middle-aged bloke sitting right there on his throne with golden hair peeking out from just under his crown.
His piercing eyes locked dead onto me.
So, Luika, you've come to me bearing the great golden eagle emblem. Tell me, what is it that you need?
Only a handful of men in all of history had ever held one of these crests. The vast majority belonged to royalty or completely untouchable families.
This one was granted by the king's father. I dropped to one knee with a noble bow. And trust me, guys, what happens next is absolutely brutal.
Come with me to check out the start of this absolute madness. I told him, Your Majesty, I'm trading this crest for someone capable and a bit of gold.
King Sir Luke the 11th was a fair bit surprised, but he agreed.
Head down to the Knight's Order and pick yourself an apprentice. Plus, I'll chuck in 1,000 gold coins for getting this eagle back.
See, this order answers directly to the king himself. The recruits here are the absolute elite of the kingdom. Heaps of them as second sons from noble families, just looking to make a name for themselves.
That's just how things work around here. Only the firstborn gets the inheritance.
The rest lose their titles the second they come of age and have to fend for themselves.
Some of them end up joining merchant or adventurer guilds.
If your family's got cash, bloody brilliant. If not, you're right back to being a basic commoner. Honestly, I reckon I'm pretty damn lucky.
I was an only child, so I inherited my baron title without a hitch. A crappy bit of land is way better than having bugger all.
As for my mum, I never actually met her. Don't even have a single memory of her.
When the commander dragged me over to the training grounds, I could feel every single pair of eyes glued to me.
The apprentices were giving me the side eye, knowing I was just some lowly baron. Serving a duke is a whole different ballgame.
A massive step down, mate. Some looked spooked, others were downright disgusted, and a few even hid behind their mates.
I couldn't care less, to be honest.
With the king's thumbs up, I could have snatched up a count's kit if I bloody well felt like it. Not that I was planning on it, though.
Get a load of this. I checked out their stats from the Royal Reserve and they were wild. Rambo, Marshall, 74.
Strategy 40, Loyalty 0, Rank C. Talents, Spear Mastery and One-Handed Sword.
Arch, Marshall 68, Strategy 56, Loyalty 0, Rank B, Talents, Eagle Eye and Archery.
They were all pretty skilled in their own right, and their levels were fairly neck and neck.
Anyway, you can always boost that with training. Then I stopped right in front of one bloke. Norral, Marshall 96, Strategy 80, Loyalty 0, Talents, Horse Tamer, Eagle Eye, Great Warrior.
Norral's stats were absolutely mental, way out of the league of everyone else.
Better than any nobles, hands down. He stared right back at me, cool as a cucumber. I knew right then he was hungry for it.
Being a commoner, he'd purposely held back during the exams so he wouldn't embarrass the fancy noble kids.
The Knight Commander strolled up to us. Nurl, as of today, you're graduating from the Order. You'll be serving under Baron Lingwei. The bloke didn't even blink. He thumped his fist to his chest and bowed. Yes, Commander.
You're probably thinking he hated the gig, right?
Yeah, nah, he already had his own master plan cooked up.
A baron's turf is way out on the border, crawling with bandits and non-stop turf wars.
If he managed to lead a guard unit out there in the sticks, he'd have endless chances to rack up some serious military achievements. Sure, I'd end up taking the credit as the noble, but if he built up a solid rep and started winning tourneys, a commoner like him could actually become a noble himself.
He definitely had his own sneaky reasons for wanting that title.
Sitting back in the carriage, I was racking my brain on how to splash all this gold.
With 1,000 gold coins just sitting there, my first job was to sort out my soldiers' back pay immediately.
That was going to cost dozens of coins. After that, I was planning to drop 500 on weapons until all chimed in.
Young master, shouldn't we be hiring a blacksmith? It clicked for me straight away.
Training up my own blacksmith would save an absolute fortune in the long run. Iron gear is bloody expensive in Norrance.
A basic iron sword sets you back about 1 gold coin.
Chuck in some chainmail and a shield. Outfitting a single soldier costs 10 coins, and they still look like a dressed-up peasant.
In an actual war, troops at that level are absolutely useless, not even good enough to be cannon fodder.
The top-tier nobles have lethal heavy cavalry, and on top of that, bloody griffin riders.
Magic squads and whole armies of alchemical constructs. Those kind of trump cards cost a massive amount of cash.
Literal mountains of gold. And trying to train up a blacksmith isn't exactly a walk in the park either. It's all about natural talent.
My skill can suss out talent, but the gold just isn't enough to snag a decent blacksmith. And we'll leave it right there. What would you guys do next?
Come along, let's see how our boy gets his pride back. The news about the eagle emblem flew fast.
Rumours spread like crazy, and of course it took absolutely no time at all to reach Lord Phaedra. There he was, quietly sipping his tea and stroking his moustache. His only reason for being nice to my old man was pure greed for my granddad's gladiator shield.
My dad, Ryan,
was an absolute beast of a warrior, and Phaedra just used him, forcing him to train his troops and sending him right to the front lines to slaughter bandits.
We Lucas were military through and through, while the Phaedras were just merchants. Even so, Phaedra had hundreds of light cavalry and almost 1,000 guards.
we couldn't even feed our own people. My engagement to Phaedra's daughter Lena was just a spur-of-the-moment thing after my dad saved her life years ago.
But now that my old man was gone, Phaedra looked at me like a massive dead-end investment.
And a good merchant never sticks to a deal if they reckon they're going to lose coin.
I watched from the shadows while Norrell paid my guards their wages. I used my skill to check the stats of every single one of them.
Combat 20, strategy 18, bloody tragic.
Hansen, combat 23, strategy 10, 0 potential. And it was the same story with all of them. Every single one was a bloody embarrassment.
Pay attention to this, because it's key. Rubbish stats and absolutely pathetic loyalty. The classic sort of bloke who'd leg it the second a fight turned nasty.
Norrell's face wasn't looking too flash either, to be honest.
Just the thought of leading these blokes was giving him a cracking headache, and the state of my territory was way worse than I ever imagined.
Crumbling walls and completely rusted steers.
Most of them couldn't even afford decent leather armor, let alone chainmail.
If he had to lead this mob against real bandits, he'd probably chuck in his dream of being a noble right then and there, without a second thought.
After paying everyone off, Norrell came looking for me. "My lord," he stammered. He was clearly struggling to find the words to say what we were both thinking.
Norrell, I know exactly what you're going to say. I cut him off cold. This is the last squad in our territory.
From now on, they're under your absolute control. Don't go easy on their training.
He was properly shocked that I handed over authority so fast. But even with solid training, it'd take a month minimum to whip him into shape.
What about the weapons? He asked. Good point. Training means bugger all without proper gear. Arming a guard properly would cost thousands of gold coins. Looking at me, his eyes clearly doubted I had that kind of cash lying around.
You'll have the gear in exactly 1 month, I assured him, dead serious. Until then, just focus on the training. I don't think he entirely bought it, but I was the boss, so he just nodded and went along with it.
Look, you and I both know the truth here. I had absolutely no bloody clue how I was going to pull that off.
I checked the local population. Almost all of them were just simple day labourers, miners, or uneducated hunters with stats that were dead set useless for war.
I let out a massive sigh. Lulu put a cup of tea on my desk. The young master isn't happy. She always picks up on my moods.
I just scored 1,000 gold coins and a talented knight. Why was I still so bloody frustrated?
It's nothing, I muttered. Oh, by the way, she added, I heard a group of slave traders rolled into our territory just today.
Maybe they've got someone useful. I looked at her, completely gobsmacked. Lulu, how did you know I desperately needed people?
She smiled sweetly. Buying ready-made weapons is ridiculously expensive. If we had our own blacksmith, we'd save an absolute fortune.
The soldiers' weapons are falling to bits and you're short on gold, right? With a strategy stat of 73. She was sharper than pretty much all the reserve knights in the capital. She'd figured out the gear issues just by standing next to me today. Clever girl.
Truth is, it wasn't weird at all for slave traders to pass through Luika territory. Most of them were foreign merchants from the Yarde or Rima kingdoms heading inland to do their dodgy business.
I went straight to meet the merchant.
A middle-aged bloke, skinny and dressed impeccably. He looked at me and Lulu with a disgustingly slimy smile.
I picked up on it instantly. The bastard was already sizing Lulu up like she was nothing but merchandise.
That pissed me off big time, and he caught on to my anger pretty bloody quick. Obviously, he didn't want any trouble with a local lord on his own turf.
He walked me over to a line of 6 massive carriages covered in black cloth.
What kind of slave are you looking for, my lord?
Combat? Companionship? Any preference for race? I completely ignored his sales pitch.
Any stuck-up noble would jump straight at those overpriced categories, but I wasn't going to fall for such a pathetic trap. Trust me on this. What happens next is bloody epic. Show me the commoners, I ordered. He looked gutted, but he took me to the third carriage.
Come with me. When he pulled back the tarp, the girls were shaking like terrified little kittens. Half human, half cat. Tribal traits. Interesting. I had a quick squiz at their stats. Nancy.
Combat 7, Strategy 40, Talent, Night Vision, Aquina, Combat 40, Strategy 40, Rank C, Beast Taming.
Her eyes were absolutely wild and fierce. She glared at me, completely defiant and full of pure rage. But that slave collar around her neck was impossible to take off. No way. She was a decent option, but not exactly what I was after.
I desperately needed someone with a knack for blacksmithing, and I was absolutely strapped for cash.
Then I spotted a huddled silhouette in the cage. Saruka. Combat 5. Strategy 99. Rank A.
Talents, magic affinity, blessing of wisdom, expert traveller. My heart skipped a bloody beat.
Her combat skills were practically 0, but having strategy at level 99 was absolute madness.
I was hooked. Even though I couldn't take my eyes off that huddled cat girl named Saruka, I kept my face completely blank, total poker face. How much for these slaves? I asked, sounding as bored as possible.
The scrawny merchant smirked. 10 gold coins each, sir, but if you take 3, I'll knock 20% off the price.
Get a load of this. It's brilliant. He held up 3 fingers, acting like it physically pained him to offer it. I played hard to get, but inside, I was absolutely cheering.
Most of those cat girls were tiny, skin and bones, and looked really sickly.
Any normal bloke wouldn't touch them, unless he had some twisted tastes. There was no way in hell they were worth 10 gold.
Forget it, I'll pass, I said, waving him off. The merchant started panicking and changed his tune right away. Tell you what.
Buy one and I'll chuck in another for free, mates rates. Now I was stoked, but I kept pretending to be on the fence.
Righto, sounds fair. First, I pointed at Ina. Out of all of them, she looked like the healthiest and prettiest of the lot. The merchant gave a knowing nod. Of course, the young master picks the best-looking one. Then I pointed to Saruka, who was still huddled in the corner. The merchant's face dropped in complete shock.
Saruka hadn't eaten a thing in 2 days and looked like she was on death's door. If I hadn't bought her, he definitely would have just tossed her out.
Even still, this bloke was making an absolute killing off the deal.
He'd bought those slaves off the border guards for a measly silver coin. Now he was raking in 100 times that in pure profit.
After the sale went through, the bloke suddenly turned super friendly. Do you need anything else, sir? I swear by the goddess of light.
That these slaves are incredibly loyal. They'll never turn on you. I just laughed to myself. Well, obviously.
Those colours would blow their bloody heads off if they even tried. Got any dwarves? I asked out of the blue.
Everyone knows dwarves are the best blacksmiths on the continent. If he had dwarves, I'd definitely be able to find a top-tier smith. He nodded and pulled the tarp off another carriage. Inside, there were a bunch of dwarves slumped over, looking just as wrecked as the girls.
But their stats were a fair bit higher, and most of them actually had the blacksmith talent.
Are you seeing this too? My eyes locked onto a scaled dwarf. Beaglin, combat, 30, strategy, 50, rank A, talents, heir to the Forge of Valor, artisan's heart, blacksmith. His raw stats weren't exactly mind-blowing.
But the system still gave him an A rank. Clearly, talents carry a massive amount of weight in the evaluations, not just the base stats.
This was exactly what I was looking for. I was so keen that I completely forgot to ask for the actual price. The cheeky merchant tried to flog him off to me for 10 gold coins.
Dwarves usually fetch a higher price than the girls because of their blacksmithing skills, even though a lot of owners can't get them to cooperate, even with the collars.
10 gold coins was double what the bloke paid, but to me it was an absolute steal. Done deal. I counted out 10 shiny coins. Then the merchant asked for my name, swearing he'd keep an eye out for any special goods I might fancy in the future.
I introduced myself and slipped an extra gold coin into his hand.
If you hear any weird rumours or stumble across any rare races, give me a shout. His face lit up in a flash. Of course, dear Lord Linway, this humble merchant is always at your service. You could easily tell his opinion of me had just gone through the roof. A generous noble who pays well and doesn't act like a snob, that kind of connection was definitely worth it. I got Oxu, my driver, to take the slaves back in the carriage. Being a noble, I obviously couldn't ride in the same carriage as the slaves. Reputation matters, but I wasn't about to make them walk the whole way either. Call it a little act of mercy, thanks to my modern earth sensibilities. Walking back with Elilu, I stared out at all that barren land and tried to come up with some brilliant genius way to develop it. And do you know what I came up with? Absolutely nothing. I'm just a regular, everyday bloke from Earth. Tag along with me for this story. I'm no genius or some hotshot engineer. My one special talent is being able to see people's hidden skills. I can't even throw a punch.
Young master, you're really growing up, Lilu said out of nowhere. I just stared at her, completely baffled.
I mean, you're a proper man now. You bought some ordinary slaves, sure, but you also scored the friendship of a really well-connected merchant.
Your father never even bothered dealing with merchants.
Ah, right. I muttered. I had no idea how to tell her I wasn't playing some grand strategy. I was just being myself. It was purely a fluke.
Then an idea popped into my head. With her incredible strategic mind, Elalu would make a brilliant manager.
It'd take a massive load off my shoulders. Elalu, how would you feel about becoming my new official manager?
Her eyes went wide and started tearing up. Young master, am I not doing a good enough job as your personal maid?
I blinked. That definitely wasn't the reaction I was expecting. No, of course not. It's just, I reckon you've got real talent.
That's the only reason I wanted you to give it a go. She hung her head, looking absolutely crushed.
I don't want to be a manager. I just want to stay right here by your side. I didn't push it any further. If she wasn't keen, I wasn't about to force her into it, even though it was a bit of a bummer.
It's been a few days since I bought the slaves. Today, I organised a big lunch for all of us.
I had a massive table to myself. There was a separate one for Norrell and a smaller one set up for Aquina, Biglin and Saruka.
The food was just sautéed cabbage leaves with some white bread and a massive bowl of soup.
I took a bite. It was a bit bland, but salt and pepper are total luxuries round here, so the cook was pretty stingy with them.
Now get a load of this. Back on Earth, this would be a super basic meal, but here, for a noble, it's considered top-tier luxury.
Lords usually only get wheat cakes or bran bread. The commoners and slaves, they eat way worse. Rock-hard, freezing cold black bread. You literally need a knife and a ton of water just to choke it down. In the middle of summer, you could probably use the bloody thing as a lethal weapon.
Go on, dig in, I said, looking around at everyone. No one touched their plates. Norrell and Lilu were fine, but the slaves looked absolutely petrified.
They probably reckoned this was their last meal before I did something awful to them.
Why on earth would a noble feed them the exact same food he was eating? It made zero sense to them.
Nyril thought it was pretty weird too. A noble eating in the exact same room as a bunch of slaves is way out of line here.
Well, at least we weren't sitting at the same table. Lilu couldn't care less though. She's been eating with me for years.
Biglin the dwarf caught on first. If this was going to be his last meal, he was going to enjoy every last bite of it, so he absolutely wolfed everything down in seconds.
He downed the potato soup in one gulp, then started eyeing off Saruka and Aquina's untouched plates, looking like he was about to smash those too.
Aquina was the next one to start eating. Saruka was the last, acting all shy and cautious.
She only picked up her fork once she saw the others were already eating. I nodded, feeling pretty satisfied, and gave the cook a direct nod too.
And I know what you're thinking. What about the cat girl? Well, Saruka was looking a lot better. When I first brought her home, the poor thing was completely out cold for days.
I had to call in a priest just to heal her up.
That sent me back 7 or 8 gold coins. It stung like crazy, but she's going to be crucial for my future, so I'm not cutting any corners.
After lunch, it was straight back to the grind. There's always a massive mountain of work waiting for me.
I sent the butler out to track down some merchants selling cheap iron ore.
But we ended up finding out that the locals in the Luika territory had been sitting on a massive iron mine this whole time.
The mines had been leased out because my family couldn't afford to develop them.
I blew 600 gold coins buying the iron back, and then dropped another 100 on blacksmithing tools and proper forging gear.
The rest went straight into the daily upkeep and repairs for the territory. I slumped back in my chair and let out a massive sigh. You never realise just how bloody expensive everything is until it's your turn to foot the bill. I need to figure out a way to make a ton of cash, and I need to do it fast.
Later on, I found out a bit about what was happening with the slaves behind the scenes.
Even though I didn't hear it straight from them at the time, Saruka and Aquina were lying down in the comfy room I'd set up for them. Warm beds, fresh sheets, and no more begging for stale black bread scraps. Just a few days ago, living like this would have been completely unimaginable for them. They were both from the exact same cat tribe village. They should have just lived simple lives, gotten married, had kids, grown old in peace. But the enemy army completely trashed their home, and anyone who fought back was brutally slaughtered. The soldiers did some truly unspeakable things to the older women. The only reason these two were spared was because a centurion decided they were too young and scrawny to survive that kind of brutal treatment. So they sold them off to slavers. Trust me, what happens next gets pretty full on.
Aquina started speaking in a quiet whisper.
Come with me. You and I are about to see how Aquina was always jealous of Saruka back in their village.
Saruka was beautiful and sweet, absolutely adored by everyone. Aquina, on the other hand, was the wild, rebellious one who only ever went hunting.
When they got captured together, Aquina actually felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. She hated humans with every fibre of her being. After all, those soldiers butchered her parents.
But now, this human bloke was giving them warm beds and actual food.
Aquina was suspicious. She reckoned he was just fattening them up to take everything from them later on. But honestly, these girls had already survived absolute hell.
What worse could he do to them? With those slave collars around their necks, they couldn't defend themselves at all.
They couldn't even take their own lives.
What Aquina kept to herself was that our main character paid 7 or 8 gold coins to a priest to save Saruka's life. That was more than they cost together. Only she got that kind of special treatment.
Meanwhile, Aquina just got standard rations, same as everyone else.
She spitefully kept that a secret. She wanted Saruka to suffer the exact same terrifying anxiety, instead of feeling special or protected.
Even as slaves, Saruka was getting the best and Aquina was absolutely sick of it. Moving on, our feudal lord rocked up, knocking on the door of the massive blacksmith.
After a week of gourmet grub and booze, the sturdy dwarf already adored me.
You could tell I wasn't your typical stuck-up noble. Dear master, Biglin is here to serve you, he told me, and that loyalty felt 100% genuine.
The top-notch food, the fruit wine, the total freedom to move around. This bloke was living like a king, way better than back in his own village.
Pay attention to this bit. He absolutely loved working for me, and he knew exactly why I was standing in his forge.
What do you reckon about this forge? I asked him. It's bloody brilliant, he replied. I sighed, putting on my best sad face. You know Luika territory isn't exactly rolling in cash, right?
You wouldn't want the territory to go belly up, losing all that white bread and fruit wine, would you? That hit him right where it hurts. You and I are already spoiled rotten by the good life. Master, I really want to help, but the weapons I forge sometimes end up with a few flaws. Regular folks probably wouldn't even be able to use them.
I had no bloody idea what he was on about, so he offered me a hands-on demonstration. While the dwarf was hard at work, I took another look at his stats.
His loyalty had gone up to 70%, high enough to start trusting the guy, though I was still super curious about his skills.
That valor-inheriting forging skill, it took him a fair while. He heated, hammered, and purified the iron over and over without taking a breather. He slowly gave it shape until the hunk of metal turned into a lethal sword. After the final quenching, a massive, heavy iron blade rested on the table.
She's ready, master. And right then, I figured out its huge flaw. I tried lifting the damn sword with my bare hands and couldn't even budge it a single millimeter. Absolutely humiliating. The weight of it was just ridiculous. You'd need an insanely high level of martial strength just to hold the bloody monstrosity without tipping over.
I called Norrell over. He picked up the weapon without breaking a sweat, and his eyes just lit up.
He gave it a spin in his hands. He was absolutely head over heels for this sword.
It's a legendary sword, he said, 1,000 times better than anything on the market, but your average soldier would never be able to lift it. So that was the famous flaw.
To Biglin, humans were just fragile creatures, completely incapable of using proper dwarven weapons. My lord, would you let me use this one?
What would you do in my shoes? Spot on. Norrell hesitated, but up till now he'd only been fighting with cheap scrap metal that constantly broke.
Of course I gave it to him. He thanked me 1,000 times over, and his loyalty jumped straight from 70 to 80% in a flash. It had been stuck at 70 for ages.
Hasn't budged since he started serving me. A proper sword finally broke the cap. Biglin, I told him with a grin, keep churning out weapons exactly like this one.
He sighed. All right, but master, your knight has some freakish strength.
Not every soldier is going to wield my sword so easily. I just smirked. I know. You just focus on the smithing. I'll make sure you're well paid for it.
1 silver coin for every single sword at this monstrous quality. Biglin looked at me like I was tripping. Silver for a sword? 10 swords make a gold coin.
He could forge about 20 blades a day. That meant 2 gold coins every single day.
I was supplying the materials, and technically he was just a lowly slave with 0 status. Praise be, great master. He took a deep bow, and you could feel the absolute genuine gratitude.
His loyalty shot up by exactly another 10 points.
At this rate, I could take off that slave colour and he'd still never leave. Back at the mansion, Norrell was absolutely buzzing with pure warrior excitement.
My lord, that dwarven blacksmith's weapons are truly bloody incredible.
Do you really reckon your guards will be able to swing heavy swords like this one?
He asked with his eyes gleaming. Not yet, but after my brutal training, absolutely they will. If we kit out our 100 men with an arsenal like this, those bandits
are going to think twice. The armor can wait.
I gave him a pat on the shoulder. I'm counting on you, mate. I won't let you down, my lord. It was super obvious that Norrell was completely changing his tune about me.
At first, when he found out I'd traded my granddad's gladiator shield for 1,000 gold coins, he was deeply disappointed and absolutely disgusted.
He thought I'd thrown our family's honour completely out the window. But trust me, you and I both know that this noble has only just started building his unstoppable army.
In their eyes, he felt even worse off.
But today, everything changed. I'd hired an absolute legend of a dwarf blacksmith and put him straight to work.
Come with me, boys. Maybe this young bloke from the edge of the kingdom wasn't as bloody useless as I thought.
If he kept making brilliant calls like this, maybe Norrell wouldn't even need to strike out on his own as a common noble.
Maybe he could just ask me for whatever he wanted once I became.
Powerful enough to actually give it to him. Bigland turned 600 gold coins into 200 heavy longswords in just a week. Seeing rows upon rows of leather-wrapped swords being carted around felt almost unreal.
I promised I'd pay him, and I always keep my word, but I'd have to flog off the spare swords first. My guard barely had 100 blokes, so 100 swords would be more than enough.
or maybe even less. Not just anyone could swing those absolute monstrosities.
Like, I'd noticed you needed 30 points in martial strength just to lift the damn thing, and over 40 to actually master it. Get a load of this. When I saw the new soldiers, I thought I was tripping. Their stats had suddenly gone through the roof.
Blokes with martial arts barely hitting 20 points were now sitting at 35, 38 and even higher.
Their ranks jumped from E to D. Loyalty shot up from 40 to 52.
That lazy look in their eyes had been replaced by something completely ruthless. Every single one of those 100 guards had pushed right past 30 strength.
Norrell really knew his stuff when it came to training soldiers with proper weapons. Now they could absolutely wreck any ordinary bandit.
The armor, though, that was still a massive headache.
After handing out the weapons, Norrell gave a quick speech. He'd promised that his lord would gear them up, and now he'd made good on his word.
He asked me to say a few words, but I passed. Right now, I just needed to sell off those remaining 100 swords. A standard sword cost less than 5 coins, but these were special. My goal was to rake in 30 per sword. Selling a lot would mean 3,000 gold coins. I'd be absolutely mental to go anywhere near Fedra's territory, though.
If that old bastard found out I had top-tier weapons, he'd try to sneak his spies in from every angle.
I was heading straight to the capital. Bigland still couldn't forge armor yet, so I was going to have to buy some.
This trip to the capital was an absolute must, even though I'd literally just gotten back from there.
Olu didn't come with me this time. The poor girl caught a nasty cold from the brutal weather changes and couldn't even get out of bed to say goodbye.
Norrell offered to escort me, but I ordered him to stay put.
The road to the capital was safe enough. I only needed a couple of the lads with me. And here's the kicker. The real danger was lurking right back in my own territory. If any bandits rocked up, someone had to defend the place. He had to stay and lead the guards. The trip was pretty chill without Ulu, though I did feel weirdly lost.
It took me bloody ages to sort my clothes out, and I even caught myself looking for that cup of tea she always makes me, only to remember she wasn't around.
I just cracked up and shook my head. It's crazy how quickly you can get that used to someone.
So bloody fast. As the dirt tracks widened into proper roads, we finally rolled into the capital. My whole mindset was completely different this time.
I headed straight to the Far East Trading Company, one of the biggest outfits in the capital.
They operate in Lawrence plus the kingdoms of Jad and Rima. It was set up by the famous Duke Simon, an absolute warmonger of a politician who fully believes in total conquest.
You'd think a bloke that thirsty for war would never run a merchant's guild. But apparently, flogging goods and conquering nations aren't exactly mutually exclusive. The company had an unblemished rep, so this was exactly where I'd be selling off my prized swords.
In a world where war could kick off at any second, weapons were always in high demand.
My noble crest got me a parking spot with no worries at all. I slapped one of the swords right onto the master's desk.
Is this what you're looking to sell, Lord Loika? I gave a nod and took a sip of the tea he'd offered.
If the price is right, we could probably work out a long-term deal. He slowly drew the sword from its sheath.
I hadn't even checked his stats yet, but just from that single movement, I knew his martial strength was well over 40. He inspected it under the sunlight. "It's a solid piece," he said, But it's not a magic weapon. You catch my drift?
I knew exactly what he meant. Plenty of broke nobles rock up trying to flog their family heirlooms just to scrape together a few coins.
And that's where we wrap things up for now. I just smiled. As you can see, mate, it's just your standard weapon, but it's been bloody well forged.
He appreciated the honesty. He could offer 30 gold coins for the lot.
Stick around with me. Let's watch him make an absolute killing. It was exactly what he expected, so he asked for more since he had heaps of them. He had a bit of a think about it.
If he brought 100, he'd pay 40 gold for each one. 40 times 100, 4,000 coins all up.
After decking out his own blokes with 100 good swords, he'd walk away with over 3,000 gold coins in pure profit.
Deal. A pleasure doing business with you, mate. Then he handed 3 silver coins to Aksu and the 2 soldiers who tagged along.
He told them to head out and have a good time in the capital. They bolted, absolutely stoked, sprinting straight for the local pubs and betting shops.
Axis stuck around to help out. 4,000 coins filled 4 whole chests stashed away at the Far East Company until he was ready to head off.
He headed out to buy some armor.
100 sets of iron chainmail that set him back dozens of shields and about 1,000 coins.
For a split second, he thought about putting together a cavalry unit, but a proper horse cost 300 gold. He only had enough cash for 10 of them.
He chucked that idea out the window pretty damn fast. Before heading home, he picked up some gifts, a pink ribbon for Alulu and some colourful ones for Akina and Saruka.
They had only been working for him at the mansion for a very short while. They spent their days learning the ropes as basic maids, but if he wanted to earn their genuine loyalty, he couldn't afford to play favourites at all. Then he swung by a magical bookstore. Magic was still a really bizarre and distant concept.
In all his time living on this continent, he hadn't bumped into a single mage.
Now, pay close attention here, because this is bloody crucial. Only the highest nobles could afford mages. But as it turns out, little Saruka had an absolutely massive natural talent. She was a proper natural-born mage. He just needed to make absolutely sure her loyalty was maxed out, and then go all in on training her. He decided to grab 3 books. A magical introduction for 130 gold, magical applications for 300, and romantic tales for 100. The first 2 were to educate little Saruka, and as for that last one, well, we all need a bit of light reading from time to time. The bookshop even chucked in 2 wands for free. They were just for practice, since he'd dropped an absolute fortune there. On his way out, 2 massive red moons were hanging right overhead. He was ready to head back. He was really missing Elalu's tea. When he rocked up, she was already waiting impatiently at the door for him. She threw herself at him the second he stepped out of the carriage, hugging him incredibly tight. She only let go when she caught the weird looks from the people standing around. She'd been absolutely miserable all week without him. He gave her a gentle boop on the nose and handed her the pink ribbon.
She clutched it like it was the greatest treasure in the world, looking up at him with the sweetest puppy dog eyes.
Akina and Saruka were standing nearby in their uniforms, looking super shy and unsure of themselves. When he handed them their ribbons, they were completely blown away and absolutely speechless.
They honestly weren't expecting a single thing. He checked their stats while they were beaming with happiness.
Their loyalty had shot right up. Akina was sitting at 60 and Saruka was up to 80.
Not half bad. It was finally time to get those slave collars off them. After dinner, he cleaned himself up and spoke out.
Are you girls seeing this? The maid stayed dead silent. Starting tomorrow, no more collars. Those things weigh a bloody ton, right? Look, if any of you genuinely want to leave, just say the word. I'll give you enough cash to cover the trip.
Alalu looked like she wanted to argue, but she shut up real quick when she realized he was dead serious. He slapped the slave contracts down right in front of Saruka and Akina.
Ripping up those papers would shut down their collars for good. They'd be completely free. The 2 of them just stared at each other, totally gobsmacked, with their eyes wide open.
Saruka was the first to speak up, her voice quiet but firm. Master, Saruka doesn't want to go anywhere.
She slid the contract right back to him. Akina hesitated for a split second, but pushing past her fears, she ended up doing the exact same thing. He just smiled and ripped both contracts to shreds. The pieces fluttered to the floor. He wasn't mucking around. They could pack up and leave whenever they wanted. The reason didn't matter. They just needed to know that they were finally free. No strings attached, no hidden motives, just pure freedom.
It was done. He'd bought them just to set them free. After handing out the gear, Maya and her guards got geared up, finally looking like a bunch of proper professional soldiers.
Before this, if you'd told him they were just some dodgy village militia, he would have believed you.
The kit he'd handed over was something most blokes wouldn't even dream of getting their hands on.
Even Fedra's light cavalry were only running around in leather armour with absolute rubbish for weapons.
Iron armor was usually strictly reserved for a Viscount's personal forces.
His 100 blokes could take on pretty much anything, well, except for mages or griffin knights. He gave his soldiers the order to wipe the area clean of bandits.
She placed her fist over her heart. I won't let you down, my lord.
And trust me, guys, what happens next is absolutely bloody epic. 200 blood pigs had been terrorizing the whole area, but you and I both know damn well they're about to seriously regret it.
Stick around, mate, because today you're going to see how our main guy sorts out what even his own old man couldn't pull off.
They had the numbers on us, but their weapons were absolute rubbish compared to ours.
Their arrows just bounced uselessly right off our shields and armor. Norrell's brutal training was finally paying off big time for all of us.
Our heavy swords smashed straight through those bandits' gear like they were just bloody twigs.
0 casualties on our end, just 3 wounded, an absolute wipeout of those filthy grubs. We nicked a massive haul of weapons, and to my absolute shock, over a dozen top-tier horses. These bandits had been raiding merchant caravans and hoarding supplies for a good while.
Some of them died screaming, dead set convinced that an actual night order had rocked up.
And honestly, watching how my guards fought, I couldn't blame anyone for thinking that. I tossed those dodgy weapons over to the dwarf, Biglin, for him to scrap. The horses, though, they were the real jackpot. I could finally start putting together a proper cavalry unit. The only snag was that nobody knew how to handle these wild horses. Well, except for my old coachman. But the poor bloke was way too old and had a bung leg, so he couldn't exactly look after him.
He'd been loyally serving the Luika family since my granddad's time. I needed to track down a proper stable hand who was actually up to the task.
That's when Ina stepped right up and volunteered. She had this undeniable natural knack for taming beasts, and animals were just naturally drawn to her.
Handling those horses would be an absolute piece of cake for her. Now, pay close attention here, guys. Poor Akina had spent days on end just testing the waters to see if she was finally truly free.
One morning she walked right out to the very edge of the Luika border and just waited there until sundown. When she rocked back up, the only thing they asked her was where the hell she'd been all day.
Nobody was chasing her. Absolutely nobody was keeping tabs on her. She was finally free, and ironically that left her feeling completely lost. She didn't have a home to go back to anymore.
Even if she managed to trek all the way across the territory back to her tribe's lands, her parents were already dead.
She'd lost absolutely everything. I'd given her a warm bed, a good feed, and some peace. That fiery look of pure vengeance in her eyes was slowly starting to fade. After all, sticking around here wasn't half bad. Anyway, changing the subject, I called Saruka into my study one arvo.
The last bit of afternoon sun was streaming through the window right as she pushed the door open, in complete and absolute silence.
My lord? Did you want to see me? I'd been having a bit of a read. Well, honestly, I was way too wrapped up in one of those cheesy mage romance novels, and I had to snap back to reality.
I sneakily shoved the book to the side. Saruka, grab a seat. Tell me, are you keen on learning a bit of magic?
Her loyalty stat had shot up to 85. I walked over to the shelf to hand her a book, but accidentally grabbed the cheesy romance novel instead. Her face went beetroot red. She'd clearly taken what I was suggesting the entirely wrong way, and I instantly realized my stuff up.
My own face started burning up with absolute embarrassment, so I swapped it out lightning fast for the Introduction to Magic manual.
It's this one. I swear to you guys, I wasn't trying to make a move on her or anything creepy like that. Once we both calmed down a bit, I explained that she might actually have a natural gift for magic.
If you could become a powerful mage, you'd be a massive asset to the Luika territory.
Since you've decided to stick around, I'm hoping you can pitch in wherever you can. She gave a little nod and took the book, though she was clearly looking pretty unsure of herself.
But, my lord, I don't even know if I've got a lick of magical talent in me. I believe in you, I told her straight up.
Hold up a sec. You and I both know that by telling her it doesn't matter if she stuffs up and that this place will always be her home, her loyalty is going to go completely off the charts.
With my full backing, Saruka threw herself 100% into studying magic. I took her off all her maid duties so she could purely focus on her training. In the meantime, I dropped another 2,000 gold coins on iron just to keep Biglin flat out. I even hired a couple of local blokes from the village to give him a hand at the forge. Fast forward a month, and Biglin had pumped out 500 absolutely cracking swords. Going by a last asking price, that was 25,000 gold coins just waiting to be cashed in.
Just to put that into perspective for you, the monthly tax income for the entire Luika territory barely scraped together a measly 10 coins.
$25,000. It'd take us a couple of lifetimes to rake in that kind of dosh from taxes alone. Even Phaedra would be green with envy at that mental amount of cash. Staring at all those shiny, freshly forged swords, I wasn't just looking at weapons, mate. I was looking at literal mountains of gold.
I paid out Biglin, and he marched straight down to the pub to celebrate in style, shouting a few rounds for his two helpers.
Honestly, as long as a dwarf has a good feed of meat and a bottomless pint of beer, he's a happy camper. Things were looking way up on the security front too.
After Norrell completely wiped the floor with those bloody grubs, the whole area had finally settled down.
The miners and hunters who'd bolted from the bandit attacks finally started making their way safely back to the Loika territory.
Back at the trading company, the guildmaster welcomed me with this massive grin. He confirmed that the swords from my last batch had been an absolute smash hit.
The nobles who bought them just couldn't stop raving about their top-tier quality.
They were buying them for 50 coins and flipping them for 70. And we'll wrap it up right there. Trust me, guys. You and I are going to have a bloody good time seeing what he does with the next batch.
I asked. His eyes absolutely lit up.
Get a load of this, mate, because you're going to bloody love it. After another flawless deal, Wise threw in some incredibly generous freebies from the Far East Company.
A purebred northern stallion worth about 1,000 gold.
He also chucked in some heavily decorated armor and a top-tier noble sword. All up, we're talking about 5,000 gold. I gladly took the lot, promising to keep our partnership going strong.
Later on, while we were sinking a few drinks, Guildmaster Wise leaned in nice and close.
He offered up some serious insider intel for the road ahead. He'd even dropped the formal Lord Luika rubbish and started using my actual name, Linway, a dead giveaway that we were mates now.
In about 2 months, the third Great Autumn campaign kicks off.
If you reckon you'll join, why not fight under Cal Newton's banner? With our friendship, you could easily score a solid spot as a centurion.
Now, the Autumn campaign is an ancient tradition over in Norrens. Basically, it's just an excuse to raid the bloody rich borderlands of Rima and Jade. Up until now, we'd never been strong enough to even get a look in.
I used to struggle just scrapping with local bandits, but now my guards were fully kitted out and battle-hardened. Check this out, because this changes everything. The offer was pretty bloody tempting, seeing as Cal Newton was the son-in-law of the powerhouse himself, Duke Simon.
The kingdom's politics was split right down the middle, hawks on one side, doves on the other.
And most of the nobles had already picked their poison.
I was one of the rare fence-sitters, mostly because I used to be too weak and broke for anyone to bother recruiting. A basic centurion gig sounded pretty bang average, and honestly, it was.
Any bloke off the street who joins the army gets the exact same offer from a count. Now, if they dangled a 1,000-man commander role in front of me, I might have given it a burl.
I mean, yeah, I'd pocketed Wise's flashy gifts today.
But that didn't mean I was ready to chain myself to Duke Simon's bloody faction just yet.
At the same time, telling Wise to bugger off straight to his face would ruin a ripper business relationship. So I just played the drunk card. I started slurring my words, asking if there were any elf girls sniffing around the place.
Looking around the room like an absolute drongo. Where are they? I can't spot any. We'd both been sinking pints like there was no tomorrow all night anyway.
Pretending I'd completely missed his pitch was a piece of cake. He just clapped me on the back, laughing his head off.
You're off your face, mate. We don't offer that kind of service here, but if you're keen, I'll keep an eye out for some elf slaves for you.
The bloke's smart. He completely dropped the political chat. As long as I wasn't backing the rival faction, doing business with a neutral party suited him just fine.
I was a bit gutted, obviously, but at the end of the day, I was just a minor pawn.
Even he was just some bloke without a title working for Count Itchen, who was taking orders from Duke Simon. The bloody pecking order kept going way above his head. Anyway, that was that. I used the elf excuse to bail and got up to leave. Wise made a half-assed attempt to stand up and see me out before stumbling straight back onto his stool.
Don't bother getting up, Guildmaster Wise. Very well, Lord Luika. I eagerly look forward to our next big deal.
And just like that, he was back to calling me Lord Luika. We both understood, without saying a single word, that the political talk was dead in the water.
We both caught on to that little dance, right? The second I left, Wise completely dropped the drunk act. I bet his eyes went dead sharp the moment I stepped out the door. Once I was back in the carriage, all that booze finally hit me like a ton of bricks.
It hit me bloody hard too. The bumps and rattling from the ride completely wrecked my guts, and I ended up chucking up non-stop.
The maids had an absolute nightmare cleaning up the bloody carriage. After that, I was just stoked that little Yulu didn't see me in such a state.
Her mix of genuine worry and non-stop nagging would have done my head in. I've been living in this weird world without my folks for ages now.
All my blood relatives are long gone. My old man had brothers, but they packed up and left to become knights after getting completely shafted out of their inheritance.
Maybe they kicked the bucket in battle. I've never heard of any other Luika making a decent name for themselves out there.
Little Yulu is the closest thing I've got left to family. Meanwhile, Akina had been doing a stellar job breaking in all the horses.
That desperate urge to run away had totally vanished from her eyes.
Saruka was the obedient sort, throwing herself completely into her magic studies. I banked on her entirely because of her stats, but she didn't have a clue.
She was terrified of letting me down, so she grinded day and night without a break. That is, until one day she finally knocked on my study door.
Master, I've finished reading both books. She placed the tomes down on my desk. A text worth 400 gold coins, dusted in less than a single week.
I knew the girl had a heap of talent, but this blew my wildest expectations right out of the water.
I checked her stats panel. Saruka, Martial Level 5, Strategy 108, Loyalty 87. Her traits included Magic Affinity, Blessing of Wisdom, Seasoned Traveller, and Novice Mage.
Can you believe that? Absolute madness! Her strategy shot up by 9 points and she picked up a brand new magic skill. But of course, real progress like this meant my wallet was about to take another beating.
Trouble is, the bookstore in the capital only sells beginner-level stuff.
Come along with me. To step things up, it's time to enroll in the Royal Magic Academy.
Intermediate training will set you back 5,000 gold coins, and the advanced level, you're looking at 20,000 absolute minimum.
Most talented commoners just figure out the basics on their own.
Then they make a living doing jobs for the adventurers guilds or working as court mages just to pay for their studies.
I was pretty good at making a buck, but just thinking about those future expenses felt like a massive weight on my chest. Even so, there was no way I was going to skimp on my very own cat mage.
I'll see you in a few days at the Magic Academy in the capital, I told her. I'm going to grant you the prestigious title of Knight under the Luca territory.
I'll be covering every single one of your expenses at the Academy. That Knight's title was honestly a lifesaver.
The Academy is absolutely crawling with posh noble kids who'd bully a defenseless cat girl without a second thought.
At least with my family name backing her up, along with the Academy's racial equality policy, she'd be safe and sound.
Paying her tuition gave her a solid safety net. Saruka just stood there, completely frozen.
Her grey tail was twitching like mad, and her little ears just wouldn't stop trembling. I'd basically just told her she wasn't a slave anymore, that she was a bloody knight now, and that I'd foot the bill for her entire education.
It was way too much for her to take in. Master! Her massive eyes went completely red.
She'd been an orphan, raised by the village elder. When he passed away, she survived totally on her own, scrounging up whatever scraps she could find. Foraging for wild herbs, then some soldiers grabbed her and she was turned into a slave.
Get a load of this. She honestly thought her life was totally over, but I gave her dignity, safety, and a real future. Nobody had ever treated her this well before.
"What's wrong?" I asked, looking pretty confused. It tugged at my heartstrings a bit. I took a quick squiz at her loyalty level. It used to be sitting at 87, but now it hit 100.
It had totally maxed out, just like that. With that kind of fierce loyalty, every single coin I spent on her was absolutely worth it.
All of a sudden, she threw herself right into my arms. Her tiny body was just trembling against mine. For someone so skinny, she had a shockingly tight grip.
Actually, for a split second, I completely lost my breath. Master, little Saruka will never, ever let you down.
Her pale blue eyes locked onto mine, and I could literally see my own reflection in them.
She was memorizing my face, burning it straight into her heart. I'd given her a brand new life, and she'd made up her mind to dedicate the rest of hers to me. Later that same night, the moonlight was streaming in. I was busy studying when I heard these soft footsteps padding down the hallway, followed by a gentle little knock.
"Master, are you asleep?"
It was Saruka, standing right there in the doorway. She was hugging this big white pillow, looking up at me with eyes just brimming with hope.
For a quick second, my mind definitely wandered somewhere it shouldn't have, but I managed to pull myself together. "No, I'm awake." "Can I sleep in here?" she asked super softly.
"Can I sleep here with you?" My bed was absolutely massive. You could easily fit 5 Sarukas in it. She was just feeling dead nervous about leaving. Heading off to the academy, that is. That was all there was to it. I let her inside. We lay down in the same bed, and my breathing finally steadied out as I drifted off to sleep.
You can probably guess what happened next. I had absolutely no idea,
But Saruka actually stayed awake for a fair bit, just watching my face in the moonlight. She thought about everything we'd been through, the awful hardships, the absolute nightmare of slavery, the starving hunger, and she convinced herself that it was all just a test from the gods, because at the end of it all, she'd found me.
If the gods really are out there, she whispered to herself, please look after my master forever.
Aquina wasn't exactly a huge fan of Saruka, or at least that's what she kept trying to tell herself.
But when the day finally rolled around for Saruka to head off to the academy in the capital, the first thing Aquina felt wasn't jealousy. It was just sadness. Aquina knew deep down she didn't have a lick of magical talent.
Saruka had completely given up on staring at those books, nearly dozing off after just a few pages.
That made it pretty bloody obvious. Aquina, I'm heading off now, Saruka said softly. She always knew the girl didn't really like her, but she also remembered the honest truth. Back in the village, when all the other kids tried picking on the new girl, it was Aquina who stepped up and defended her in dead silence. And when the old village chief passed away, and Saruka was crying all by herself,
Aquina had hidden behind a tree just to keep an eye on her. Saruka never ever forgot about that.
Aquina didn't say a word. Saruka just gave her a warm smile and a wave. Then she walked straight over to me. Since Alulu was standing right there, Saruka kept a bit of distance. She was still feeling pretty guilty about sneaking into my bed the night before.
Looking back on it, all I felt was a bit of embarrassment and a reluctant sort of admiration for her own sake.
Poor Elalulu had absolutely no clue that she'd already been outplayed. She just gently grabbed Saruka's hand and told her, take good care of yourself in the capital.
Saruka's heart was thumping in her chest. She genuinely felt like a sneaky little kitten right then. I just gave Saruka a small encouraging nod. With her loyalty maxed out at 100%, the investment was completely worth it.
After the carriage disappeared down the dirt track, Ina finally snapped out of it and shouted after her, have a safe trip. I'll be right here waiting for you to come back. And that's where we'll leave it for now, mates. The summer's winding down, and trust me, this Wild Autumn campaign is shaping up to be absolutely spectacular.
Stick around, mate, because this story kicks off with a surprise invite from the Norwin's kingdom itself.
I honestly reckon they only remembered we existed because that gladiator emblem got sold to the royal family.
Otherwise, I highly doubt King Seleuc I would have given a second thought to some absolute nobody out in the sticks.
This campaign was the perfect bloody chance to rack up some military merits, and those merits were the only ticket to climbing the ranks. With a higher rank, my voice would carry a lot more weight across the kingdom, and I'd finally be able to protect what actually matters to me.
Though dreaming of scoring a new territory from a promotion was pretty unrealistic. Basically, every square inch of land in Nents was already spoken for.
A new territory would only be on the cards after a brutal war that forced Rima or Yai to hand over their lands.
Since that wasn't happening anytime soon, I split up my remaining funds. 5,000 gold coins went straight to paying off the tuition fees.
Out of the 20,000 left over, I dropped 10,000 on pure iron ore. The Luika territory had enough in its mines to last a whole bloody century.
Pumping that gold into the local economy absolutely stoked the local miners. They were over the moon.
Even the old hunters were chucking in their jobs to become miners. More workers brought in, more merchants, and that meant massive tax revenues, an absolutely perfect cycle.
This place had always been dead broke. We had no way to use all the ore we dug up, and the land was way too dry to even bother trying to grow crops. But now, Biggin's massive forge gave it all a purpose. I spent 5,000 on fixing up the busted walls, digging out wells, and laying down some decent roads. The last 5,000 funded 200 locals who were tough enough for Norrell to train up alongside our own guards. Beglin was put in charge of sorting out their weapons. In a massive up like the Autumn campaign, you don't usually see full-on frontal assaults. No heavy cavalry, no majors dueling it out. Those trump cards are strictly saved for all-out wars.
My infantry was going to be more than enough. One morning, I caught a look at myself in the mirror. Golden hair, brown eyes, long lashes. Got to admit, I was looking pretty damn good.
I had a lean build and a bit of muscle, but my actual combat skills were practically zero.
Truth be told, I was just a pretty boy noble without a single fighting bone in my body.
Lulu was helping me pick out my gear to head down to the training grounds and inspect the troops. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, and I heard the old butler.
My lord, you have a visitor. Who is it? The butler from the Fedra territory, sir.
Lord Fedra invites you to dinner tonight. Fedra. That bloke's two-faced smirk instantly flashed into my mind. So that old merchant rat had caught wind of how fast we were growing here in Luika. In just a few months, we were already blowing right past his own territory.
Listen up, because you're going to absolutely love this. The exact same bloke who slammed the door in my face before was now crawling back and begging.
No. My voice came out ice cold and dead flat. Yes, my lord, the butler replied, backing out of the room straight away.
She finished straightening out my white shirt. I looked sharp as a tack. There was this natural, noble aura about me that I'd never actually felt before.
Righto, Elalu, let's get moving. We headed straight down to the training grounds. The place was absolutely massive.
Norrell had expanded it to fit the booming number of soldiers. I watched them running through their sword drills and gave a really satisfied nod.
What a world of difference from the pathetic bunch of weaklings I inherited back at the start. You could clearly see two main groups.
The first mob, the original 100, now had the combat chops of 40 fair Dinkan veterans.
They were sparring full contact with real bloody swords.
I know what you're thinking. Real injuries? Yeah, but it's 1,000 times better to bleed out here than to end up dead out on the battlefield.
The second group was the 200 fresh recruits, blokes still in their 20s and 30s, grinding through the basic sword drills under Norrell's watchful eye.
With under 2 months until the autumn campaign, I was planning to roll out 50 heavy cavalry riders.
Nearly all the horses were snagged from those scumbag pig bandits and left under Aquina's care.
Those absolute beasts of northern war horses had bulked up heaps and were surprisingly quick on their feet.
Bigland forged full suits of horse armour using blueprints we picked up from the market. The silver armour gleamed, and it was so absurdly heavy that a built soldier could barely drag a single set.
Once strapped onto those massive horses, they turned into absolute lethal killing machines. But I wasn't about to flash that horse armour straight away during the big campaign. I'd get the camp followers to lug the crates along with the pack mules. Heavy cavalry packs a punch, sure, but it's way too slow, and this wasn't exactly a siege.
So the armour was strictly just an insurance policy, and more importantly, I didn't want to draw any unnecessary attention.
The fact that anyone could actually afford heavy cavalry would spark a hell of a lot of curiosity and jealousy among the other snobby nobles.
And you and I both know the real deal. I had to keep my head down and lay low until I became completely unstoppable.
Come with me, because you and I are about to see something bloody incredible. At the Magic Academy, her instructor called her up to demonstrate a fire spell.
She raised her practice wand, chanted the spell, and a brutal blast of flames punched clean through a massive boulder.
The whole class erupted into cheers. Her professor was absolutely blown away.
In just over 1 month, Saruka had mastered every intermediate spell with insane power. In just 2 months, she'd score her intermediate mage certification. She could even have a crack at becoming the youngest advanced mage in history.
The instructor knew that if Saruka hit that rank, the major noble houses would kill for the chance to recruit her.
Some small-time feudal lord could never afford tuition on that level. Powerful families would approach Saruka in secret. It was going to be the ultimate test of her loyalty.
What the instructor didn't know was that she was counting down the days until she could come back. She remembered every single coin I'd invested in her.
Even if I couldn't foot the bill for her advanced training, she'd earn the cash herself before even thinking about betraying me.
Between classes, Saruka picked up a gig as a tutor. A countess had hired her to teach magic to her little girl.
100 gold coins a lesson. Saruka was incredibly grateful for the opportunity.
Now pay close attention to this. One afternoon when she rocked up to the Pharaoh's mansion, someone stopped her in the hallway.
It was a stocky, middle-aged bloke, Count Pharos himself. After a quick intro, the noble got straight to the point.
Saruka, I'd love for you to join the Pharos family. Whatever you're getting paid, I'll double it.
Your advanced magic tuition, a perfect staff once you graduate, rare spellbooks.
The Pharos family will give you absolutely everything you need. Saruka paused for a second, then gave a polite bow.
Thank you for your kindness, Count Pharos, but I'm already an official knight of the Luika territory. I don't have any plans to join another house.
The Count was caught off guard, but he wasn't offended. In fact, her knocking him back actually impressed him quite a bit. Someone who jumped ship at the very first offer wasn't worth the hassle. Her rejection just proved she was a talent worth chasing.
He gave a slight smile. Well, if you ever change your mind, my door is always open.
He was super confident. He was one of Duke Simon's most powerful vassals, a real titan of the kingdom.
Compared to some dirt-poor, no-name lord out on the frontier.
You and I know the truth, but he reckoned the girl would be swapping sides in no time.
With just 1 month to go before the autumn campaign, Norrell's ruthless training had turned 300 guards into proper soldiers.
Everyone's martial stats were sitting over 40, and a few were even pushing 50.
Their ranks jumped straight from E to C. I picked out the top 50 and promised them war horses.
The looks on their faces were absolutely priceless.
Just having iron armor and decent swords was already a massive luxury. They'd never even dreamed of this, and now they were being pulled aside for heavy cavalry training.
They needed to be competent riders before the campaign kicked off, or my dream of a heavy cavalry charge would just stay on paper.
Nora was absolutely stoked. He already knew how to ride, but he never expected us to deploy them so fast.
He picked out the most impressive stallion and dived straight into training right alongside his men.
Akina watched sadly as the horses were led away one by one. She'd built a really strong bond with them after weeks of taming.
The only one left in the stable was the purebred the guild leader had gifted me.
"Master, please tell them to be careful while training," she muttered. Her tail was swishing from side to side, and honestly, it really made me want to pet her.
But Akina wasn't exactly the sweet, cuddly type. She was nothing like Saruka.
She'd probably bite me. Then she suddenly broke the silence. "Master, is there any news about Saruka?" I shook my head.
There were no letters from Saruka, just receipts from the academy and a note praising her for snagging her brand new intermediate mage certification.
I wasn't exactly sure what that meant, but it sounded bloody incredible. Akina's face dropped, but a second later she gathered her courage and turned completely red.
"Could I write a letter to Saruka?" I smiled. "Of course. Just hand it over to the old butler and he'll send it off for you."
"Thanks, Master." She ran off, completely embarrassed. That was the very first time I'd seen Akina.
Acting so shy. Meanwhile, back at the Magic Academy, things took a turn I never saw coming. Just on a whim, Saruka's instructor decided to teach her an advanced level spell. Trust me, what happens next is wild. Just 3 months after enrolling, Saruka had already mastered advanced magic.
"Come with me. We're going to check out something her veteran professor hadn't seen in 30 years.
Saruka's theory was already top tier, and her practical magic was finally catching up.
At the academy, vice-counts and counts were hounding her with piles of cash and full-ride scholarships.
They even threw rare grimoires at her, but she knocked them all back. She stayed bloody loyal to me, some no-name, modest baron, and nobody could wrap their heads around why.
Her professor went straight to the headmistress to score a scholarship for his star student.
He came straight back saying the headmistress was asking for Saruka. Walking down the hall, the professor laid out the situation.
The headmistress was Aaliyah, the 13th Grand Mage of the whole damn continent.
An honorary Duchess of Normans and a borderline immortal elf. She'd been running the academy since day dot.
Countless powerhouse mages graduated under her watch, serving not just Norlands, but snagging top-tier positions in Rima and Jade as well. Saruka pushed open the heavy door and copped a look at a brutally gorgeous elf.
Those dead cold reddish eyes sized her up from head to toe.
Her grey robes couldn't hide that absolute unit of an aura. Aaliyah ordered her to step closer, and Saruka, gulping hard, did as she was told.
The headmistress stared her down for a solid minute. Finally, she declared that the girl had bags of talent.
Listen up here, because this is the moment of truth. She asked if Saruka knew who she was. Aaliyah cracked a cold smile, totally outshining the flowers outside.
She flat out offered to take her on as her personal disciple. Was she going to say yes?
Those words hit her like a bloody lightning bolt. She stood there gobsmacked for a few seconds before giving a nod.
She gave a deep bow. Even someone as innocent as Saruka knew how massive of a deal this was.
Being the direct apprentice to a legendary Grand Mage changed absolutely everything.
No more bullying or dirty tricks. Now she could level up her magic with the most insane, airtight protection you could imagine.
The news of Saruka becoming Aaliyah's brand new disciple spread through the capital like wildfire,
making it all the way up to the king himself.
I found out about it later, but the impact was absolutely huge. Aaliyah wasn't just some headmistress, mate. She was a genuine pillar of the empire.
An honorary duchess appointed by the founder of Norlands, who didn't even have to bow her head to the king.
She'd been running the academy for centuries, all thanks to the massive lifespan of her race.
And in all that bloody time, she'd only ever taken on 2 personal disciples before Saruka.
The first one was a legendary human. Bloke fought 3 Grand Mages at once and even butchered a dragon all on his lonesome.
Back in his day, he was crowned the downright strongest sorcerer on the continent.
The second was an elf who now runs the show down south, sitting pretty as the 5th strongest mage in the world.
You see how mental this is? Our Saruka is the 3rd one in history. No wonder the whole kingdom went absolutely off its rocker.
Invitations and recruitment offers were raining in from everywhere.
But now, Saruka had the guts to chuck those letters straight in the bin. She never would have dared to do that before.
Now she had absolute rock-solid backing.
Aaliyah started digging into her past. Once she found out my little mage was a knight for some no-name baron like me, she gave her a quick smack on the back of the head and flat out banned her from spilling where she came from. Anyone who already knew would have to keep their trap shut. Aaliyah knew bloody well that if folks figured out some nobody baron was backing this prodigy, they'd paint a massive target right on my Lawika territory.
Saruka had to make herself completely untouchable on her own before we could go public with our little connection.
Aaliyah was dead set neutral in kingdom politics. She wasn't going to openly protect my turf, not even for Saruka. Breaking centuries of neutrality would make her target number one for both political factions.
Zero dramas, please. Count Pharos, who tried to recruit her earlier, copped a letter sealed by Aaliyah herself.
From what I heard later, he almost had a bloody heart attack. The letter was super polite, but the message was brutal. Keep your gob shut about Saruka.
Pharos was kicking himself big time for not locking her down sooner, and there was no way in hell he was going to piss off a Grand Sorceress.
But his merchant brain started ticking over. Why was Leah so interested?
Taking personal interest in someone from the Lawika territory? Was that Baron secretly tied to the headmistress?
He even pictured some secret love child and decided to go digging. Come on, admit it. You want to know what he digs up next, don't you?
My territory, and maybe forge some alliances just in case.
Listen up closely, because meanwhile, Saruka got Aquina's letter and absolutely burst with pure joy. She'd been so caught up in her studies that she'd completely forgotten to write home.
She was happily writing her reply when Aaliyah caught her off guard. "Writing to your boy, are we?" Aaliyah looked pretty annoyed.
"No, master, it's my friend Aquina." Her expression softened right away, but then she dropped something that completely froze Saruka in her tracks.
Until you become a true mage, it's best you don't reply. Saruka was absolutely clueless.
You've got to be strong enough to stand by his side. Just being an advanced level mage isn't going to cut.
You need to become a supreme sorceress.
Only then will anyone who tries to threaten the Lawika territory have to think twice. But I miss them, Saruka whispered. Aaliyah smiled really sweetly.
When you hit the rank of advanced mage, I'll give you a week off to go visit your real home.
Her eyes lit up instantly. To be back by his side, that was all the bloody motivation she needed to push herself to the absolute limit.
Charge! My cavalry roared as they tore across the training grounds, lances in hand, kicking up dust absolutely everywhere. They trained non-stop for a solid month with brand new weapons, and I upgraded their grub from watery porridge to proper wheat cakes to keep their energy levels maxed out.
And it worked like an absolute charm. They were training like their own lives depended on it.
Get a good look at this. Seeing my 300 soldiers, I felt this massive surge of pride. As long as we didn't run into any special units or the Royal Elite from Rhyme.
We were going to absolutely smash it in the autumn campaign. We were less than a week away from hitting the Furnace Bridge Fortress and registering with the main army.
I still hadn't heard back from Saruka, but the Magic Academy had actually sent me a few updates.
She was doing brilliantly, already the personal student of the Dean himself.
Even out here in the sticks, I knew how insane that was. I quickly figured out why she hadn't been replying to my letters.
The Lawika territory was way too weak, and she was drawing a hell of a lot of attention.
The Dane was protecting us by keeping our connection under wraps. I felt super grateful and honestly a bit blown away by it all.
Thank God I maxed out Saruka's loyalty before she left.
Otherwise, all those offers from powerful nobles could have snatched her away for good. Who would have thought that quiet little kitten would turn into such a prodigy?
Well, I did, but I'm basically cheating. I filled Aquina in on Saruka's situation.
I know what you're thinking. She was bummed out about not getting a reply, but after explaining everything to her, she felt heaps better.
Bit by bit, she was settling into life in the Lawika territory. That burning desire for revenge seemed to be slowly fading away.
Right before we headed off, I decided to give my troops a massive pep talk. 300 pumped-up guards were staring back at me with fiery eyes. I used my knowledge from Earth to throw together an absolutely epic motivational speech. Even Norrell was completely blown away. I didn't expect to be so smooth with my words. On top of my 300 elite soldiers, I recruited 800 militiamen and farmers to haul the supplies. Before we left, Iliula straightened up my clothes with red eyes, fighting back the urge to cry.
"Young master, you have to come back safe and sound." I smiled and gave her a tight hug. "I'll be back, just don't go jinxing me."
She looked pretty confused by that weird saying, but I just gave her a pat on the shoulder. I hopped onto my horse, the purebred that Guildmaster Wise gifted me.
And I led the column forward with 2 light cavalry scouts leading the pack.
The Furnace Bridge Fortress was already absolutely packed with noble banners by the time we rocked up.
This was the last stronghold before the Rhine border, usually garrisoned by 5,000 soldiers.
Beyond that no man's land, we could already spot the fertile farmlands of Rhyme in the distance. I walked up to the registration officer.
300 elite, 500 on supplies. Elite? He looked at me with total skepticism. A mere baron with 300 elite troops. Then he looked over my shoulder at my men. Shining iron armor, top-notch weapons, seriously disciplined training. Even a couple dozen riders on towering northern warhorses, fully decked out in heavy armor. He nodded slowly. Indeed, elite, he admitted, that not even most viscounts could scrap together such a powerhouse force.
If I'd been a count, it would have made way more sense to him. And just like that, we rolled into the massive fortress.
My troops were tough as nails, but among all the nobility gathered there, we were pretty average in terms of sheer numbers.
A lot of them were giving us the side eye, then their jaws would drop when they noticed the Baron's insignia had slapped on. Stuck-up viscounts and counts stopped dead in their tracks. Such a flawless fighting force belonging to a simple minor noble was completely throwing them for a loop.
And then there was this bloke named Phaedra. Trust me, I caught him eyeing my soldiers with the absolute weirdest look on his face. He'd heard that the Luika territory was doing bloody brilliant, which is why he sent his butler over to invite me to an exclusive dinner. Of course I turned him down. Stick with me, mate. You're going to see this stuck-up noble eat humble pie the second he cops a look at my massive army. I reckon he was standing there thinking, if this bloke had shown off this kind of power earlier, I never would have shut the door in his face. He could have been my son-in-law. Then he looked back at his own piss-weak cavalry in their scrappy leather armour, and the reality check hit him right in the bloody face. His thousands of guards weren't even a match for my 300 elite troops. But hey, it was way too late for regrets now. He made his bed when he rejected me, completely torpedoing our relationship for good. Honestly, I wasn't going to give him a single ounce of courtesy he didn't deserve. I rocked up to his door personally, and he treated me like an absolute nobody. Then came the night before we marched out to Rima. Heaps of nobles kept trying to suck up to me, every single one of them asking the exact same questions. Was I married? Did I want to meet their daughters?
How the hell did I build such a brutal army? I brushed them all off as politely as I could.
My old man had just passed away, so dropping the "I'm not ready to settle down" line was the absolute perfect excuse.
As for my army, I just gave a cheeky grin and changed the subject. I mean, it was impossible to explain to these blokes that I could literally see stat panels hovering in the air.
We drew straws for the marching order, and I won. We were right up the front in the vanguard, just behind the king.
Now listen up, because this is crucial. It was way riskier, but the payout was going to be massive. The poor buggers at the back wouldn't score a damn thing.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend this was some heroic quest. The autumn campaign was basically just glorified banditry.
Norian invades Rima's borders every single year. Doesn't matter if it's spring, autumn, or winter.
They nick the livestock, trash the villages, and drag folks away as slaves. Rima and Jade absolutely despise us, but they're way too weak to hit back.
All they'd have to do is team up. But mate, that has literally never happened. Rima even built this bloody massive fortress to defend themselves, but our guys just swooped in, captured the joint, and turned it into our own base.
After that absolute disaster, Rima basically just threw in the towel and copped the attacks on the chin.
Crossing into their territory was a total snorefest. The massive plains eventually turned into this huge forest, packed with villages and outposts.
The king and the dukes absolutely steamrolled all the easy targets out on the open plains.
There was absolutely 0 point trying to compete with that mob.
So I headed straight for the forest, watching those posh nobles ruthlessly round up civilians. Honestly, only one word came to mind.
Bandits. And you and I both know that's exactly the kind of scum I absolutely despised back in my own territory.
I gave Norrell a strict order. We only take out the soldiers, no touching innocent civilians, period.
Nora was absolutely gobsmacked. Capturing civilians was basically tradition around here. You could use them for free labour or sell them off for an absolute fortune.
But an order's an order, right? So he passed it down the line.
The boys had a fair whinge about it, especially about missing out on the women, but I was paying them so bloody well that not a single one dared to talk back.
We smashed our first outpost in no time. Just 20 poorly geared Rima soldiers huddled up in a tower. My cavalry absolutely wrecked them in a matter of minutes. Their gear was just pure garbage. We didn't even bother nicking their weapons, just chopped off their heads for proof. You see, the folks from Rima have bright blue eyes.
You can't exactly fake that. We cleared out a few more outposts, but still not a single trace of any villages.
By midday, the lads and the horses were absolutely knackered, so we set up camp. I went inside the tent and stripped off my armour. My shoulders were raw red and swollen to all hell. I let out a pretty bitter laugh.
I didn't know whether to laugh at my own bloody weak body or at this entire ridiculous bandit charade.
While we were taking a breather, Norrell sent out 2 scouts to recce the area. They rocked back up with some fresh intel.
My lord, there's a stone village nearby, not many guards on patrol, and absolutely 0 heavy weapons in sight.
Now, Rima is famous for its thick forests and hiding settlements right in the trees, so we went to suss it out.
We followed the scouts through a clearing until a straight path right into the village suddenly popped up.
The whole joint looked way poorer than the spots before. Gates wide open.
A few soldiers were dragging their feet on patrol. It looked pretty much abandoned, but mate, something felt seriously off.
I quickly pulled up their stats with the system. Darewin. Combat 60, Strategy 40, Rank C.
Enhanced Perception, One-Handed Sword. Then Noah. Combat 64, Strategy 35.
Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Those stats are absolutely mental. That's Royal Knight level right there. This is a bloody death trap.
Stick with me, mates. This busted-up town with its gates wide open was way too obvious of a bloody death trap. Elite soldiers playing weak, a wide-open entrance practically begging you to stroll in, with loot that looked dead easy to nab.
If we'd charged in blind, my blokes would be their trophies by now. I wasn't going to take the bait.
But I had no clue Fedra was tailing me right through the woods.
Like any dodgy merchant, he knew his troops couldn't hold a candle to the high nobles, so he reckoned he'd just stalk me and quietly scoop up the scraps after my fights.
He lost my trail pretty quick in the thick scrub. All he stumbled across were ghost towns and a bunch of border posts completely deserted. Plus a heap of Rima soldiers with their heads chopped clean off, just lying there in the dirt, still wearing their leather armour.
He couldn't believe I just ditched all that gear. Was I really rolling in that much cash?
On top of that, all the locals had bolted into the forest after I rolled through. Fedra was absolutely spewing over his rotten luck. Then, his scouts gave him a heads up about my camp and the completely unguarded town.
Fedra rode straight up and saw the exact same thing I did.
Massive gates swung wide open, the drawbridge down, and 4 guards just snoozing away. His knight was practically begging to attack, foaming at the mouth with pure greed. The women, the loot, the easy glory. The whole thing looked way too bloody good. But Fedra wasn't a total drongo. He was a lot sharper than that.
He picked up on the exact same thing. Why wasn't I attacking?
With my 300 elite troops, I'd absolutely flatten a handful of trash tier guards.
Pay close attention, mates. The fact that I was just sitting back and watching meant massive danger. So he set up camp in the pitch black and decided to wait it out. I kept a close eye on the place for 2 straight days. The town stayed terrifyingly dead quiet. 0 peasants slaving away in the nearby paddocks, not a single hunter heading in or out of the bush.
Not a single trace of civilians, just that lazy bunch of guards chilling on the wall.
When I checked their stats, their martial levels were well over 60. We're talking practically Royal Knight level.
A whole town packed with lethal soldiers, pretending to be some weak-ass garrison with the gates wide open. We dodged a massive bullet. It was one hell of an ambush setup. My blokes had been roughing it for 2 days straight on black bread and 0 campfires.
Just local water keeping us going. I made the call to bail out. Pushing any further would just drag us closer to Rima's Fort George, the biggest stronghold up north, absolutely packed with heavy artillery, mages, and 20,000 elite troops. My 300 blokes wouldn't even be a light snack for that lot.
I hung around a bit longer to see if some drongo would fall for the trap, hoping to cash in on the chaos.
Fedra rocked up, but that sly old fox was way too careful to take the bait, and right as I was about to leg it, everything went completely sideways.
A scout came galloping flat out from the forest and slipped straight into the town.
Minutes later, the main gates violently blew wide open. Heavy cavalry came swarming out like mad. Fully armoured riders charging headfirst into the woods. I counted them myself. We're talking 3,000 heavy cavalry.
Right behind them marched endless waves of infantry, every single one decked out in iron armour. This was the royal elite, the absolute best of the best. Norrell was breaking into a dead cold sweat.
You reckon you know what would have happened, right? An attack would have been an absolute bloodbath. Fedra definitely felt the exact same way.
He must have felt insanely relieved he didn't charge in. These were House Rima's troops, heading straight for the open plains to hunt down King Soloko. Only a massive target like that would justify rolling out the Royal Guard.
Looking at the birds getting spooked and scattering in every direction from the deep woods, it definitely wasn't just one army.
Multiple armies were converging, a lethal, perfectly timed strike aimed directly at the king.
Soloko had 5,000 guards and 2,000 knights with him, but Rima had thrown in way bloody more, and there was absolutely no way to warn him in time.
The king didn't bring anywhere near enough backup. Norrell was dead certain he was in serious trouble.
He was spot on too. Norient might have been stronger overall, but Rima was putting all their chips on the table.
Soloko just treated this like a standard raid and only brought a modest crew. All those birds scattering through the bush were a dead giveaway of Rima's massive troop movements.
Obviously, our little squad of 250 infantry and 50 riders wouldn't even leave a scratch on that royal elite.
They were just as good as my blokes, and probably had us beat on pure brute strength.
What do you lot reckon? If you ask me, the king will pull through just fine, unless there's a bloody traitor in the mix.
Norient never attacked on a set schedule, but Rima already had the ambush set and waiting.
Stick with me to see this absolute madness. The plan got leaked, but there was zero time to think. Once Rima marched out, the city was left completely empty.
Boss, this is our shot, Norrell reckoned. He wanted to loot the abandoned city before Phaedra beat us to it.
But I had my sights set on something way bigger. How far away is Fort George?
Nora looked at me, absolutely baffled. Less than half a day's march. We're heading for Fort George, boss.
I could see it in his eyes. He thought I'd completely lost the plot, but then it clicked for him.
Fort George, the most massive fortress in the north, had to be practically dead empty. They'd sent their entire elite force out to ambush Seluk.
Not a single soul, not even in their wildest nightmares, would expect a tiny force to strike their headquarters right in the middle of their own offensive.
It was absolute bloody madness. No siege gear at all, and we were just 300 blokes.
But the logic was dead on. If that fortress was ever going to be vulnerable, it was right bloody now. I gave the order to push forward.
All units, dump everything except for the horse armour and your spears, flat out to Fort George. Back behind us, Phaedra charged straight into the empty city.
He captured over 1,000 civvies, nicked their supplies, and genuinely thought he'd pulled off some massive victory.
He noticed I'd vanished, but he was way too busy counting his loot to care. Meanwhile, out on the plains, everything had gone horribly, horribly wrong for Seluk.
The spook birds gave him a warning, but his own arrogance completely blinded him. Being the undefeated king, he never gave a toss about Rima's power.
Pay close attention to this bit. When his very own dukes and counts suddenly stabbed him in the back from the inside, Seluk's mind just went totally blank.
His own bloody nobles had sold him out.
The loyal royal guard instantly boxed the king in with these massive steel shields coated in anti-magic.
Lucky for him, there were no enemy mages around, and the sheer chaos made the archers useless, but up to 40,000 blokes from the right faction were now full-blown traitors.
Years and years of political tension between the factions had just blown up in a total bloodbath.
Your Majesty, we need to fall back right bloody now, the Knight Commander screamed in sheer panic.
Seluk snapped right out of it. Off in the distance, an absolute tsunami of Rima's heavy cavalry was bearing down on them fast.
Over 50,000 riders making the whole bloody earth shake. Not even the Royal Guard's spear formations could tank a hit like that.
The left-wing nobles, led by Duke Simon, fought like absolute demons to carve out an escape route.
They might have hated each other politically, but they weren't turncoats. They knew taking out Seluk wouldn't fix a damn thing.
His grown-up son would just take the crown, and there were still 20,000 royal knights sitting back in the capital.
That would kick off a full-blown war between the kingdoms. Once they broke through the lines, Duke Simon and the top brass bolted, leaving their own grunts behind to fend for themselves.
Those poor abandoned bastards had no other choice but to fight a brutal, bloody battle to the death.
Dropping their weapons at a time like that just meant getting absolutely trampled by the heavy cavalry.
And here comes the beautiful karma you and I were waiting for. Those right-wing traitors had actually cut a deal with Rima for a clean, coordinated strike.
But the cavalry didn't show an ounce of mercy. They just steamrolled through everyone without giving a toss, butchering both the rebels and the loyalists all the same.
Those backstabbing nobles died without having a clue what the hell had just happened.
They got totally played. Rima never had the slightest intention of sparing them. Meanwhile, that forced march over to Fort George was really taking a massive toll on my boys.
Sprinting for half a day straight in full iron armour would have absolutely wrecked most armies out there.
But the sheer hardcore training my lads went through, plus the top-tier grub, kept them right on their feet.
When we finally laid eyes on that massive fortress, I yelled for them to halt the march straight away.
Fort George was heaps bigger than Furnace Bridge. We're talking gigantic walls, banners flying everywhere, and this massive royal flag that instantly caught my eye.
If there was a member of Rima's royal family still chilling in there instead of out hunting Seluk,
this place was hiding a seriously big fish.
but my heart just absolutely dropped. The gates to the fortress were wide open.
But the walls were absolutely packed with soldiers. Every single one of them had stats just as ridiculously high as the actual guards back in Traptown.
Tough, lethal, and backed up by rows and rows of loaded crossbows. One wrong step and they'd turn us into a bloody sieve.
I had binned absolutely everything for this gamble. I even threw out the trophy heads we collected to score our war credits.
I gave up that easy city that Phaedra took over. If I rocked up back home empty-handed, I'd be the absolute laughingstock, the bloke who led elite troops and pulled off absolutely bugger all.
Trying to storm that fortress now was just pure suicide. Hiding out in the bush was way too dodgy. A patrol would definitely spot us. So what the hell do we do now? Trust me, mate, you're going to want to stick around for this.
Stick with me, because here's where it gets bloody good. I was just about to call the retreat, and then 5 riders came charging through the gates.
Leading the pack was this young bloke decked out in gold armour, and right above him, the royal banner of Rima flying high.
A chubby noble and a real skinny knight were riding right next to him. I fired up my system and checked the kid's stats. Pedro, Marshal, 30.
Strategy 60. Royal etiquette and royal pressure talents rank C. Loyalty score 0.
I've never seen anything like it. Every single thing about him screamed royalty, and they were heading straight for my hiding spot.
My heart started racing. Bagging a prince and making a run for Huica territory would be an absolutely epic military feat, an unimaginable achievement.
Even if King Saluk kicked the bucket out there, catching a prince guaranteed me a title. I gave Norrell the signal to ambush.
Take him alive, I whispered. The bloke in the gold armour is definitely a Prince of Rima.
Norrell's eyes absolutely lit up with excitement. Catching a prince would give him bragging rights for the rest of his life. He gripped his sword tight. The fat noble, Count Bajan, was trying to talk the prince into going hunting. He was rabbiting on about some rare deer in the woods.
The skinny knight spoke up carefully. Count Bajan, we are in the middle of a battle.
Is it really safe to be out here? The Count just laughed his head off. Saluk is already surrounded.
I bet our scouts are bringing back the news of our victory right this very second.
The fighting is half a day away from here. What enemy dog would even show up in this area? They rode into the woods.
Watch it now. A rope snapped taut in a flash. The riders went down hard, and my soldiers finished them off.
Instantly, right with their swords. Before the trio could even blink, their horses went down in the exact same trap.
They hit the dirt heavily. In seconds, they had our blades right at their throats. Don't even move.
The royal escort died without making a peep. They might have been elite, but they never expected an ambush right on their own doorstep.
Norrell looked over our 3 prisoners, the prince, the fat count, and the skinny knight.
There was something bloody strange about that knight, though. Way too small, way too delicate, even for a skinny bloke.
Before Norrell could even ask, I walked over and pulled up their stat panels. I'd already checked the prince.
The count was nothing special, but the skinny knight, he left me absolutely speechless.
Inale, Marshal, 40. Strategy, 80. Royal etiquette and alchemy mastery talents, rank A.
You guys caught on too, didn't you? She wasn't a knight. It was a bloody princess dressed up as a bloke.
I went fishing for a big catch and ended up reeling in too. Grab all 3 of them, we're heading back to our territory right now.
Yes, sir. Norrell pointed at the knight and dragged a finger across his throat.
The princess, pinned to the ground, glared at me with eyes burning with humiliation and pure defiance. She looked like she wanted to stab me to death with just that stare.
Staring death right in the face, she completely refused to show any fear. I just smirked. Like hell I was going to kill a prize like her.
Don't kill him. Tie him all up. Chuck this knight on my horse. It's the strongest. The prince will ride with them. Norrell roughly tied up the princess and tossed her onto my horse. The prince was completely dumbfounded.
How did this random stranger know they were royalty? Even so, he didn't dare make a single peep.
Behind them, George's fortress was left sitting there with its gates wide open, a paradise the prince was never going to see again.
The autumn campaign ended in an absolute disaster for Nens. King Saluk was completely fuming, his first defeat in 23 years, all at the hands of Rima. Tens of thousands of dead soldiers, and they nearly took him out too. The fallout was absolutely brutal.
The 2 dukes from the right faction who stabbed him in the back were hunted down along with their families, and all the rebel counts too.
The entire right faction got completely wiped out in a bloody purge.
The left faction, run by Duke Simon, became the only power left standing. The purge freed up a massive chunk of territory from those traitors.
though no one had the guts to ask for any land while Seluk was still so bloody furious. The nobles on the left pushed hard for an all-out war against Renite. Seluk was fuming, but he wasn't an idiot. That sudden betrayal from the dukes seemed incredibly dodgy to him.
He wanted payback, but he had to weigh up the fact that Jade could attack from the rear if Nens went all in against Rima.
After having a good think about it, he decided to mobilize 10,000 royal guards right out of the capital.
Stacked up with the noble armies, that was nearly 300,000 blokes, more than enough to teach Rima a proper lesson.
And that's where we'll leave it for now. Over in the palace of Rima, King Carlos wasn't exactly celebrating either. Yeah, he made them bleed.
Come check this out with me, mate. Our MC just wanted to send a little message to Nens, because that giant didn't even feel a bloody scratch. And then, boom, word came through that the second prince and the princess had vanished into thin air. The bloke absolutely lost his mind. How the hell do you lose 2 royals? Fort George was supposed to be completely impenetrable. The Count had ghosted too. The only thing they found in the nearby woods were his bodyguards, dead as a doornail.
Someone actually had the absolute guts to waltz right in there and snatch his kids. Even the Crown Prince shut his mouth. Losing family was a massive slap in the face for the whole dynasty.
Charles took a deep breath. He could live without his useless son, but his daughter was a bloody prodigy maid. At 16 years old, he had to get her back, whatever it took.
The harsh reality. Right after winning a massive battle, now they had to go begging and send out the diplomats. Meanwhile, I, the absolute mastermind behind this whole mess, was kicking back in my camp, checking out my prize.
Princess Ironvale was giving me an absolute death stare.
Sapphire eyes, messy grey hair. She was absolutely funeral. The little joyride hanging off the side of the horse had wrecked her guts, and yeah, I gave her a couple of smacks on the backside just to get her to stop wriggling around.
She looked ready to murder me. "So, tough girl, what's your name?" I asked with a grin.
Ein,
she spat out through gritted teeth.
Her backside was definitely still stinging. I reached out my hand to her, and she flinched away on pure instinct.
Her body had already figured out to be terrified of my hand. Take it easy, Ironvale. Her eyes flew wide open in shock.
Pay attention to this bit. Her last little shred of hope that I didn't know who she really was just shattered into a million pieces. She figured I had spies planted in Rima, because honestly, what kind of madman rocks up to do this? Deep in enemy territory with only 300 blokes and 0 intel? If Norans had rats, Rima definitely had them too. "What do you want?" she asked, cold as ice. I tipped her chin up. "Nothing much. I just heard King Charles has a prodigy for a daughter, 16 years old and already a mage. Mid-level too, the absolute pride and joy of her family." She started struggling against the ropes.
I reminded her that the enchanted rope from the capital actually blocked magic, not that it really mattered.
Either way, without a wand, mages are bloody useless. Her tone softened up. "Just let my brother and me go. Rima will reward you handsomely." I just burst out laughing. "Or I could hand you right over to the King of Nance, who's in an absolutely foul mood right now." Do you have any idea what he'd do to a princess of Rima right about now? Have a real good think about it, Ironvale. You absolutely do not want him finding out about you, do you? King Silik was still absolutely seething when the envoy from Rima showed up. He barely even listened to the bloke. But hey, even in Nebens, they don't just go around offing foreign diplomats. At first,
trust me on this, you and I really need to see this. The envoy's words made 0 sense, but then came the million-dollar question. What terms would he accept to hand back the royals?
Selik's face was absolutely priceless. He had absolutely no bloody clue what they were on about, but he played right along anyway. Yep, playing along meant getting the upper hand. Free stuff? Why the hell not? "Of course, we'll treat your royals with the proper courtesy," he said, sounding terrifyingly relaxed about the whole thing. Rima offered up the Vedra Meadows, that stretch of plains past Furnace Bridge, where literally 4 shepherds live, but Seluk pushed even harder. He wanted everything sitting outside Fort George. Absolutely everything. That was close to 1/10 of Rima's entire territory. The envoy went pale as a ghost, but he reckoned he'd pass the massive demand along.
After the envoy buggered off, Seluk sat down to try and process what the bloody hell had actually just happened.
Apparently, someone on his side had snatched Rima's royals right off the doorstep of Fort George, but who could have pulled that off?
All of his dukes and counts were right there with him in the battle. Did some random viscount really have the absolute guts to pull off something this mental?
Or maybe it was some other bloke.
He couldn't crack the mystery, but he figured whoever did it would rock up soon enough to claim the credit. And even though no one showed their face in the end, threatening war was something Nance was bloody brilliant at.
The whole narrative came together beautifully.
Norin completely thrashes Rima and captures 2 royals. That was the official story.
The public had absolutely no idea that the whole campaign had been a massive disaster.
Meanwhile, Phaedra was putting the pieces together, and he didn't like what he was seeing one bit. He was in those woods too. He'd seen me cruise right past the empty village and just vanish.
Then the news broke about the royals getting snatched. There was only one person mad enough to pull something like that off.
Me, with a measly 300 soldiers. He couldn't figure out how the hell I did it, but the time and the place pointed straight at me.
And let's be real here. What we just saw means my legend was only just taking off.
Stick around, mates, because this veteran merchant just lost the deal of a lifetime.
A son-in-law with god-tier skills and absolute priceless value totally tossed aside over a locked door and a rejected dinner.
Exactly like Sealok called it. I chucked the Ain siblings and Count Vane into a carriage straight for the capital. I had 50 knights and Noril escorting me.
My massive northern war horses turned absolutely every head along the way.
The whole city was buzzing, trying to guess which mysterious noble had managed to bag the Rima royals.
But nobody was dumb enough to try and steal the credit for a stunt this epic.
The bloke at the palace front desk recognised my gladiator emblem straight away. His eyes were absolutely glued to my armed knights and those insanely expensive horses.
I tossed him a gold coin. Tell His Majesty, I demand an audience right now.
Tell him I've brought a little gift. He looked past me and saw 2 furious, hog-tied royals glaring daggers at me in dead silence.
His eyes bugged right out of his head. This young bloke standing in front of him was the hero everyone was going on about.
He bolted off to deliver the message. I barely had to wait before I was down on one knee in front of King Selok Tessie. He sized me up, completely deadpan. This was the exact same bloke who sold out his family's honour for 1,000 gold coins. Luika, raise your head. I looked up. Right behind me stood Count Vane and the Ain siblings.
Selok was struggling to hide how absolutely stoked he was. With these 2 as hostages, a massive chunk of Rima territory was practically in his pocket.
But you could also see the utter confusion plastered across his face.
Now pay close attention here, mates. How the hell did one bloke with just a few hundred soldiers smash right through enemy lines and capture bloody royalty without a single scratch?
Was I some kind of secret grand mage? I glanced over and spotted someone completely unexpected.
Dean Aaliyah, the legendary elven mage, was just sitting right there. She never showed her face at court, yet here she was.
Staring holes right through me. I found out later that her students tipped her off about my arrival and she put 2 and 2 together instantly.
A bloke named Luika, armed to the teeth, riding straight from the bloody border into the palace. He absolutely had to be the mastermind behind the whole kidnapping.
The headmistress was definitely keen on figuring me out, and surprisingly enough, Rima actually caved to Sealok's insane demands.
Trying to take that entire forest by force would have been an absolute nightmare. Scouts hiding out in tunnels and trees, it would have been an endless guerrilla war. The cost of the war would have totally outweighed any benefits, but thanks to yours truly, Sealok got it all for free. The king then ordered me to personally escort them for the handover. I dragged the royals all the way out to Furnace Bridge. Right there, 100 Rima heavy cavalry were waiting to take them back.
And those armoured riders, mate, they were glaring at me with pure, absolute hatred.
Did you catch that? One wrong move and I'd be their next prisoner. Princess Einvel's eyes were practically burning with murderous rage.
But the second I casually raised my hand, she flinched and backed to horse right up. She definitely still remembered the absolute hiding I gave her on the trip over.
I honestly couldn't help but think the whole ordeal had left her pretty bloody traumatized.
The fortune teller didn't get any special treatment at all. Still completely tied up, they just tossed him over like a bloody sack of spuds.
He didn't even dare make a peep. Luika, the princess screamed as she turned her horse to leave.
I won't forget you. If we ever cross paths on the battlefield and I catch you, I'll treat you real well. She practically spat those last words out. Prince Peter, on the other hand, was way more chill about it, completely putting aside the fact that we were enemies. He actually seemed to respect my guts and my strategy. He knew getting captured completely ruined his shot at the throne, but he honestly didn't seem to care all that much. He was only really in the running because his mum forced him into it anyway. Luika, I do hope we meet again.
They rode off with their escort, and I just spun right around, making a seriously cold, cocky exit.
Then the king's reward finally came through. The title of Viscount, along with a massive piece of land. We're talking the size of an entire county.
It was actually land they'd confiscated from one of the nobles who got purged recently.
The only catch, it was miles away from my base, right down near the southern beastmen tribes. Everyone knew exactly what this meant. They were setting me up to eventually become a count.
I just needed one more solid achievement, whether out on the battlefield or by winning a gladiator tournament. But honestly, this reward was a massive headache.
I was just expecting a nice little Viscount's estate. Instead, I get lumped with this gigantic bit of land that's probably an absolute shambles.
Halfway across the world from my main base.
And without a single bit of admin staff to run the place. So that's where we're wrapping it up for today. And trust me, mates, you're definitely going to want to see how he sorts out this absolute mess.
Stick around, because this story is absolutely wild. The arms dealers couldn't fund 2 wrecked territories at once, and the king didn't toss me a single gold coin to get started.
Apparently the bloke expected me to pull off bloody miracles.
Once again, I dumped Luca's affairs in the hands of the old butler and Norrell. My knight was now running the show for both military training and local government.
Basically doing all the heavy lifting, and he was genuinely happy to do it.
The political landscape was crystal clear. With the right faction totally wiped out, the left was running the whole bloody show.
But Norrell knew something crucial. A king would never put up with a faction having more pull than the crown.
The left was bound to be the next target. Sir Luke desperately needed a new balancing force, and I was the dead-set, perfect candidate.
A freshly minted noble, completely unattached to any faction, with proven skills and a squeaky clean track record.
Handing me a territory the size of a county when I only had the rank of a viscount, that was the king's massive personal investment in me.
Meanwhile, Saruka caught wind of my promotion over at the Magic Academy.
She was absolutely stoked that I made Viscount for such a massive military achievement. But honestly, she was also pretty worried.
2 gigantic territories, and absolutely nobody to run them. For a split second, she thought about studying administration to help me out, but she quickly snapped back into focus.
Becoming a seriously powerful mage had to be her main priority.
If my status was blowing up, she needed to be strong enough to stand right by my side. Then she had a bloody brilliant idea.
Maybe her master, the absolute legend Aaliyah herself, could help me out somehow, whether it was with cash or talented people.
Aaliyah was one of the most powerful people on the continent. She definitely had resources to spare for this.
Just thinking about it had Saruka absolutely buzzing. Back at the academy, Aaliyah guessed exactly what she wanted before she even opened her mouth. That old elf had rocked up to the throne room that day completely on purpose.
Now listen closely to this. She didn't go there for a chat. She went to send a message. Shrewd nobles like Farah's would definitely spot the mage's interest.
Sir Luke would notice it in a heartbeat too. Aaliyah's silence was worth way more than 1,000 words.
What Aaliyah was probably aiming for was to get Pharaoh's thinking that she and I were connected somehow.
Maybe that I was her secret son. And yeah, it totally worked. Over a cuppa, Aaliyah gave Saruka her verdict. Linwei is incredible. She wasn't calling me the little kid anymore.
Just a single meeting was enough to completely change her tune. She saw me as someone with genuine guts and skill.
Add the fact that Saruka was head over heels in love with me, and Aaliyah reckoned I could go incredibly far. Maybe even build my own kingdom one day. My only weakness was my lack of magic, but with Saruka around, that was well and truly covered.
I'll send independent mages to serve him, Aaliyah said. Consider it an early wedding present.
Saruka's face went beetroot red. Master, please don't say things like that in front of Linwei.
As for the money, Saruka had blind faith in my management.
After all, I managed to cough up 5,000 gold coins for her enrollment and 20,000 for advanced studies without going under.
If I could pull that off from a tiny territory, she reckoned I'd work absolute miracles with a bigger budget.
Even Aaliyah herself was blown away, eagerly waiting to see how my epic story would play out.
Think about it for a sec. Watching a legend being born is just wild. And on top of that, business was absolutely booming.
Biglin and his crew were a relentless money-making machine, forging swords for the Far East trade.
Even after paying off all of Saruka's tuition, I still had around 30,000 gold coins left over.
They were saved up, sure, but I knew damn well it wouldn't be anywhere near enough for what was coming.
The new territory, formerly San Martin and now rebranded as New Lusica, was a massive piece of land but had 0 guards. No administration, no nothing. Just a handful of maids left behind in a completely empty castle.
So for this first visit, I brought my entire cavalry and 50 of my best troops. I made sure they were completely geared up in full armor before we rolled in.
First impressions matter, mate. The territory was in worse shape than I expected.
At least in some ways. Along the road, there were abandoned farms and mines, completely overgrown with weeds.
But unlike the old Luika territory, this land was genuinely rich and fertile.
I spotted dry lands, farms, and even orchards. This place could easily feed itself without needing to import a single thing.
A massive perk was being right near the Beastmen of the South, which totally explained the insane wealth.
Between you and me, it's bloody obvious. The previous count completely squandered all this potential.
Come check this out with me. The city was 1,000 times more developed than he'd ever imagined.
Merchants, massive buildings, a church, pubs, and even a bloody huge Adventurers Guild headquarters.
Adventurers? That meant elite warriors. And with his secret ability to spot hidden talents?
This place was a bloody gold mine. Sitting next to him in the carriage, Elalu was staring at everything with her eyes as wide as saucers.
She was stoked for him, but behind that sweet smile, something much darker was hiding.
With his new rank, his future wife would have to be a proper highborn lady.
A simple maid could never marry a powerful viscount. The poor girl had already resigned herself to just serving him, and one day, his future wife.
But that didn't take away the pain, that quiet jealousy from a childhood mate who could never, ever cross that line.
His heavily armed troops left an absolutely cracking impression on all the locals.
Merchants, mercenaries, and local minor nobles all stood to attention as they watched his imposing cavalry ride past.
His elite guard paraded through. A bloke who captured 2 royals with just 300 men was definitely no rookie, and their top-notch gear made that bloody obvious.
Listen up now. This is exactly how they rolled up to San Martin Castle.
Our main guy let out a low whistle. 2 massive floors, an absolute beast of an estate packed with gardens and fountains.
Man-made hills and spotless grounds, over 50 maids were lined up in 2 perfect rows right at the front entrance.
In perfect sync, they all bowed. "Welcome home, Lord Lingwei." Bloody hell, being a noble is on a whole other level.
The very first thing he needed to sort out in his new territory of New Luika was taking total control of the city's defences.
His 100 soldiers were nowhere near enough to cover those massive walls.
He needed to recruit soldiers, militia, and supply workers, and fast. Out of habit, he looked around for Oral, but then remembered he'd left him back in the old Luik territory.
He was going to have to sort out this massive headache all by himself.
His talent pool was painfully thin.
His guards had bumped up their combat levels thanks to the training, but not a single one was over rank 60, and their strategy stats were dead set rubbish.
They didn't have any special perks either. Their potential was totally capped. Maybe the slave market was the way to go.
New Lyco was the size of a whole county, and it actually had a slave trading house, so he decided to leave Elalu behind for this trip.
He bumped her up to head maid of New Luika, putting her in charge of training the 50 maids already there, following his strict orders to the letter.
She'd be right back by his side once they all hit the required level.
He stepped out of the mansion with 2 guards, and straight away he bumped into a bloke in a black cloak, standing right on his doorstep.
The bloke pulled back his dark hood, a bloody handsome face, wavy brown hair and standard brown eyes, but those slightly pointy ears gave him away in a flash. He was a half-elf.
Esteemed Viscount Lingwei, please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Narancel, a wandering half-elf mage, and I've come to faithfully serve you. Without missing a beat, our main guy pulled up all his stats.
Narancel, combat 20, strategy 103, loyalty 80.
Talents, minor elemental affinity and advanced mage, grade A. Now, normally he'd be pretty bloody suspicious.
You and I would be thinking the exact same thing. Why on earth would an advanced mage come looking for a rookie viscount?
But his loyalty was already sitting at 80%, way higher than Aquina or Saruka's when they first showed up.
That made 0 sense, unless someone else sent him. Did he really have that much personal charisma? Well, whatever the reason.
80 loyalty meant absolutely 0 danger. Welcome aboard, esteemed mage, the Viscount said, without asking a single bloody question.
The elf was absolutely shell-shocked. He'd geared himself up for a full-on interrogation, or even getting flat-out rejected.
He had no idea the bloke could literally see his loyalty stats. But what the Viscount didn't know yet was that Alia was the one who sent him, disguised as a simple drifter.
She gave him strict orders to pretend he just rocked up on his own accord.
He called the butler over to show Narancel around the mansion.
He told the mage he could take whatever room he fancied the most.
Nerensel accepted, figuring they must have mistaken him for some rookie. But pretty soon, he'd prove exactly what he was made of. Scoring an advanced mage for free put him in a cracking mood. With that sorted out, he made his way over to the slave trading house.
A fairly chubby manager waddled out to greet him with a massive grin.
He couldn't believe the famous Viscount who took down the royals was this young. What sort of slaves are you after, sir? For fighting or working?
Or maybe for company. We've got rare species, dragonborn, and lizard men. This continent really had bloody everything.
Trust me on this, things are about to get absolutely brutal. Demi-humans with insane strength, pricey as hell and incredibly tough to tame.
Come along and have a squeeze at this. Show me the human slaves, I ordered. He led me down a massive corridor until we reached a bloody huge hall.
These slaves looked heaps healthier than Saruka and Aquina did when I first found them.
Most of them were from the Rime or Jed folk. Those blue eyes and grey hair of the Rime mob reminded me of a certain princess. Heavy memories. The Jed had dark hair and tan skin. I had a quick squiz. Super low stats, 0 special talents, absolutely nothing worth my time.
Oh, I'm not impressed at all, I told the chubby bloke. He rubbed his hands together and leaned right in close to me.
Viscount, I've got something really special. A super rare specimen I was planning to send to auction, but seeing as you're here, well...
It's well worth a look. I guarantee you won't be disappointed. What race is it? He shot me that knowing look any bloke would understand in a heartbeat.
A succubus. I swear to you lot, I didn't just follow that merchant because I was super keen to see a succubus's body.
Not at all. I was just genuinely curious about a race I'd seen in countless games and anime back on Earth.
He took me to a room with 5 individual cages, 4 female succubi and 1 bloke. They had little wings, smooth dark backs, and tails. Succubi come from the eastern continent and have their very own nation.
They're ridiculously rare in Norrens, which makes them absolute luxury items.
Pay close attention, because you and I are about to see something bloody incredible. They had decent stats for martial arts and strategy, but 0 talents. I was about to walk away disappointed until I saw the last cage.
My eyes went wide. I nearly lost my cool. Vidi, martial, 23, completely abnormal.
Abnormal strategy, 182, 0 affinity, dragon tamer, hunter, transmigrated empress.
S rank. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. She was still totally knocked out.
Her stats were marked as abnormal, and even in that state she boasted an S rank, the very first S rank I'd ever seen in my life.
Those 4 talents were absolute madness. And that last one, transmigrated, she came from Earth too. I forced myself to keep a lid on it.
How much for these succubi? I asked, keeping it casual. The chubby merchant grinned from ear to ear.
10,000 gold for the females, 12,000 for the males. They hail from the far eastern continent, absolutely stunning specimens.
He pointed at Vidi's cage. The one in the 5th cage is the most gorgeous, but she passes out all the time. Could be some rare illness.
I'd highly recommend the other 3 instead. I'll take her, I said, pointing straight at Vidi. She alone was totally worth that steep price tag.
The others didn't even come close. 10,000 gold coins stung like crazy. And the fat bloke?
Didn't give me a single cent of a discount, though I sort of expected that. Outside, I had a bit of a stretch.
This whole massive trip resulted in exactly 1 single purchase.
You know what the deal is? Finding valuable slears is bloody hard work. I was getting way pickier than before.
Average stats just didn't interest me at all anymore. I needed high numbers or rare talents. Maybe I should pay the knights another visit.
Elite candidates were pretty much a dead certainty there, though scoring another royal permit would be a tough gig.
Before heading home, I swung by the church and got a priest to check over Vidi.
I had no clue what was causing her abnormal state, but priests are the real experts when it comes to healing. Honestly, I'd been keen to get one on my crew for ages.
A permanent priest heals the troops using magic energy, making them just as rare and insanely valuable as the kingdom's own mages.
But no one put their hand up, and building a church just to get one assigned would cost hundreds of thousands of shiny gold coins.
I'd have to look into it later. Down at the Adventurers Guild, there were definitely a few completely independent priests kicking around.
For now, it was just a matter of recruiting militiamen, so I put the word out.
A bonus of 1 silver coin a year, premium bread rations, and actual gear for anyone who made it through the brutal selection process.
For the commoners who were used to chewing on rock-hard black bread, premium bread was an absolute luxury.
Chuck in my hardcore reputation as the bloke who captured 2 members of the royal family.
And seeing my soldiers armed to the teeth, the volunteers rocked up in droves. By the Arvo, I'd already signed on 1,000 men.
Among them, 2 brothers caught my eye. Combat, 67, Strategy, 60, Loyalty, 70. Eagle Vision, Archery Mastery. The other bloke, Marshal, 65, Strategy, 70.
Both packing Eagle Vision and Archery. They were local hunters and top-notch shooters, super famous for dropping beasts.
They signed up because of my rep. Norrance respects Shear's strength, and right now my name carried some serious weight.
Once they got a load of the pay and rations I was offering, way better than any other noble, they were completely sold on joining.
I bumped both brothers up to squad leaders on the spot and got them to start running morning drills with the new recruits.
And we'll leave it there for today. With barracks fit for 3,000 soldiers, we've got heaps of room. Trust me on this. What's coming next is going to be absolutely brutal.
I'd have to bring someone in. Norrell would come down from the Luika territory to handle the proper training, because I definitely couldn't do it.
That'd leave old Luika without a commander temporarily, but things were pretty quiet for now.
Stick with me here, because the succubus Vidi finally woke up after a week being out cold, and Elialu was right there to greet her. The priest we hired couldn't figure out what the hell was wrong with her, but her health had been slowly getting better on its own.
What I still didn't know was that Vidi wasn't your average run-of-the-mill succubus.
She'd been none other than the succubus empress herself for over 300 years.
Her most trusted advisors had cruelly betrayed her, almost killing her with a curse. She barely managed to escape to the northern continent after casting a clever little spell on herself.
If anyone who wasn't at the level of a grand mage tried to take advantage of her while she was out to it, they'd instantly forget what they were doing.
Very slick. On top of that, she had a symbiotic contract with a powerful ice dragon.
The dragon's regenerative power was slowly eating away at her curse. Once she recovered, she planned to head right back and string up every last one of those traitors.
When Elialu brought her the grub, potato soup, hearty beef stew with veggies, and some white bread, Vidi instantly knew she was getting special treatment, way better than what your average slave would get.
Pay close attention here. After 300 years, she knew exactly how awful nobles could be. But a good meal is a good meal.
She wasn't worried about poison either, thanks to her protection spell. I'd whipped up that meal specifically for her. Hell, even I couldn't afford to eat that well every day.
That beef stew was an absolute luxury, but I needed to win her trust no matter what, so I spared no expense.
Meanwhile, Norrell arrived from Luika to teach his training methods to Axin and Ankro. Those 2 brothers picked things up bloody fast.
Norrell was seriously impressed and pretty blown away by my knack for spotting raw talent amongst my crew.
2 days later, he rocked up with the 1,000 new soldiers. They got straight into their usual routine, swinging and dueling with wooden swords.
Norrell also shipped over 1,000 long swords from Biglin.
As for the armour, I reckon I'd just buy it straight from the Far East Trading Company.
Beglin could knock together some armour too, but a full set took way too long. Their time was better spent forging longswords to sell.
Funds were running dry again. Biglin's output just wasn't enough to cover the massive cost of building a grand army.
Local taxes barely scraped together 100 gold coins a month. Not nearly enough. I wanted heavy cavalry, mages, hell, even griffin riders.
But even King Saluk only had a few thousand griffin riders.
Get a load of this. That was the ultimate ace up your sleeve for major wards, but dreaming that big was bloody expensive.
Young master, the succubus has woken up, Hill said from behind me. Take good care of her, I told him.
I was pretty curious about Vidi, especially with her massive talent, but I had something way more urgent to deal with. Count Pharaohs had dropped in for a visit.
I'd only ever seen the bloke twice during the autumn campaign.
I had absolutely no idea why he was here, but he was a count, and I was just a viscount. I couldn't exactly be rude. Esteemed Count Pharis.
A pleasure to meet you. Likewise. Viscount Lingwei smiled politely, despite having waited for half an hour. He studied me incredibly closely.
I got the weird feeling he was trying to spot some kind of connection between Aaliyah and me.
He didn't find any elven traits, just my blonde hair, which was nothing unusual in Norlands. After the polite small talk, he cut straight to the chase.
I'd like to set up a direct trade relationship with the new Luika territory and allow my caravans to do business here.
That seemed way too simple for a personal visit.
His own turf was close to the capital, with way better markets. New Luika was out in the sticks, right on the border with the Beastmen. What was this bloke really after? Before I could even wrap my head around it, the man laid out his real offer.
If you agree, the 300 northern war horses I brought with me are yours, a token of friendship. 300 horses!
At 300 gold coins each,
That was 90,000 gold coins. I nearly choked. What, was I his long-lost son or something?
Seeing how totally bewildered I was, he added, Lady Saruka has been teaching magic to my daughter. Consider this a thank you for her help. Please, don't knock her back. Suddenly it all clicked into place. He knew about my connection to Saruka, and by extension, Alia.
This gift was really just a sneaky way to win over the legendary Grand Sorceress by using me.
And there you have it, mates. No noble was going to just hand over 90,000 gold coins for no bloody reason.
Come check this out with me, because when a noble offers you something, you never say no. After Count Faro took off, I had a really good feeling about our little run-in.
We clicked straight away, even though I knew damn well I shouldn't get too buddy-buddy with a dangerous left faction. If they fell from grace, exactly like what had just happened to the right, all their allies would go down with them too.
But Faro didn't seem keen on recruiting me for the left. He was doing his own thing, trying to build a personal connection through Saruka and Alia. And those 300 war horses were completely mine now. No way was I giving them back.
With 1,000 soldiers and 300 horses, I could finally put together a proper heavy cavalry.
Though, to be brutally honest, 1,000 troops was still embarrassingly small for a territory of this tier. I needed at least 5,000 to make it look legit.
But soldiers cost money, and I still hadn't tracked down my next big moneymaker.
I went to check on Vidi. Honestly, she was heaps more gorgeous than I expected.
When I walked in, she was reading one of my books by the window, with the sunlight lighting up her stunning flax-coloured hair.
Her little black wings, about 2 handspans wide, rested on her back, and her dark tail flicked with a curious rhythm, curling around like it had a mind of its own.
She was still wearing that slave collar, though. I suspected it didn't mean a damn thing to her. Besides, she didn't even call me master.
"Hey there," I said, acting completely natural.
Listen to this. Hello, she replied. I didn't pull her up on the lack of a proper title. I knew full well she was actually an empress, a beast tamer, and a dragon hunter.
Picking a fight with someone like that would have been absolutely bloody stupid.
We had a bit of a yarn about the book she was reading. She spoke with this natural mix of laziness and elegance, not showing a single trace of a slave mentality.
Which made total sense for someone who used to be a queen, a transmigrator, and had been living in this world for over 300 years.
Make yourself comfortable, I told her before heading off. I didn't pressure her at all to squeeze out more info.
I just wanted to make my presence known, letting her settle in and get comfortable at her own pace. Her affinity level was still low, and I wasn't sure how to raise it without being pushy. But what I didn't catch was that right after I left, her affinity spiked up 5 points out of nowhere.
Turns out, just treating her like a normal person instead of a piece of property was enough to leave a really good impression on her.
Winter was closing in fast.
Little snowflakes were falling from the grey skies. Winters in Nora absolutely brutal. The heavy snow buries every single road for months on end.
If the farmers didn't stash away enough grub during autumn, they could easily end up starving to death. Unlike the old Luika territory, which didn't have a scrap of farmland, New Luika actually boasted massive harvests and orchards.
That meant I actually had peasants to look after now, so I got the butler to put out a massive announcement.
Anyone keen to work at the manor over the winter would score 3 copper coins a day, plus 3 square meals.
That was more than enough to draw in all the local farmers, because, mate, there was a hell of a lot of work to get through.
Feeding the horses, shoveling snow, and pitching in at the kitchen to whip up meals for 1,000 soldiers.
These were the exact chores that 50 maids used to tackle all on their own under the old count's rule, slaving away from dawn till they practically collapsed. I put an end to that.
Now, the maids only had to worry about keeping the castle clean, compared to that cruel Count of San.
Martin, I must have looked like a bloody angel sent straight down from heaven. Their gratitude translated straight into hardcore loyalty.
I could have just handed out free grub to the farmers, but I didn't want them treating it like a charity handout. People value what they earn, so creating jobs was the perfect middle ground. Keeping the folks alive through the freezing winter, all while keeping their pride completely intact.
Yeah, I wanted to expand this territory, recruit even more soldiers next year, and build something that would actually last.
I needed way more than just a basic reputation for being brave. I had to be known as a lord who genuinely gave a damn about his people.
Most of the nobles around here just bleed their commoners dry.
I reckon you and I are on the exact same page here. Growing up on Earth gave me a totally different perspective. Just because I was at the top of the pecking order didn't mean I had to act like those scumbag nobles.
The first snowfall blanketed the New Luika territory in pure white overnight.
Outside the manor, you could hear the kids mucking around in the smoke drifting from the kitchen, exactly the kind of cozy vibe I wanted for this place. The snow wasn't blocking the roads just yet, but soon enough, everything would be completely buried under the harsh winter.
My boots crunched in the snow as I stepped out. Yule trotted after me wearing a grey cloak, her cheeks completely flushed from the biting cold.
She had a thick coat wrapped over her maid uniform, hiding that lovely view I usually enjoyed checking out.
A bit of a shame, really. You can probably guess where this is heading. The commoners were rocking up for their winter work, while I was heading out to the backfield to check on the fresh recruits.
Join me for this story. With a martial level of 30, these young blokes showed real promise. With proper training, they'd hit 50, completely overtaking my veterans.
Action and Ankro were the ones putting in the hardest yards. The chance to become squad leaders had lit an absolute fire under them.
If they kept going at that pace, their spot in the cavalry was absolutely guaranteed.
The rest of the recruits were giving it their all too. No one wanted to look like a slacker in front of me. Plus, I handed out the bran bread and the coin without fail.
For blokes who'd only ever eaten black bread, this was an absolute luxury.
Up on the walls, my original veterans saluted me with nothing but absolute respect.
These blokes were there when I captured the Rorma Royals. Now they believed in me, maybe even a bit too much.
They were starting to look at my decisions like they were divine, absolutely convinced that following me meant guaranteed victory.
When they got leave to head down to the tavern and share their battle stories, the villagers hung on to every single word, totally mesmerised.
And obviously that fed their massive military pride like crazy.
From up top, I could see the whole landscape. Snow-covered fields, forests dotted with hunters' cabins, and a massive river with rapid currents full of deadly piranhas.
A brutal natural barrier. And right on the other side was the beast territory.
But pay close attention here. The Auto Tribe hadn't launched an attack across that river in 10 years. That dead silence was driving me absolutely mental. You already know how it goes. A calm sea always hides a brutal storm.
Meanwhile, over at the Magic Academy, Saruka locked in her advanced degree. She started right at the end of summer and achieved what most couldn't do in a lifetime, all before winter even hit.
Her instructor, Renee, handed over her badge with a massively proud smile.
She reckoned Saruka could become the youngest great mage on the entire continent.
Saruka just smiled modestly. Being a great mage still felt way too far off to her.
The only thing she cared about was that Leah had promised her a week off once she hit the advanced rank.
She'd get to go back home. But yeah, with all that snow blocking the roads, she'd have to hold out until spring.
She even asked the elf Alia about teleportation magic, but Alia just gave her a playful little tap. No forbidden spells allowed. Then, a really heavy, overbearing voice completely ruined her peaceful day. Miss Saruka, I finally found you. As gorgeous as a rose, just one look and I'm already helplessly in love. You can already guess who it is, right? Prince Michel, your classic youngest son studying at the academy.
Ever since she got famous, he'd been harassing her non-stop. The bloke even confessed his love right in front of all the students.
She'd shot him down flat, but the guy kept forcing these supposedly random run-ins.
He didn't give a toss about being rejected. Prince Michel, I've already told you I just want to focus on my studies.
Romance really isn't on my mind right now. Well, that wasn't exactly true. She just flat out didn't like him.
None of those nobles ever gave her a second look before she showed off her insane talent. Only one person actually believed in her when she was at rock bottom. She had it all figured out. Her future belonged right by my side and nowhere else. Your voice is absolutely enchanting, Michelle blurted out with this incredibly fake smile. You just don't know me well enough yet. I'll be back, I promise you that.
He didn't have the guts to push it any further that day. His dad had strictly forbidden him from offending Duchess Leah.
Even so, Michel was way too confident in his looks, his noble bloodline, and his sickening persistence. He reckoned a sheltered girl like Saruka would just melt over his supposedly genuine affection.
But the truth was, he just wanted Saruka's power so he could snatch the throne. She was nothing but a bloody pawn to him.
That idiot had lost before he even started playing the game. Coming down from the wall, I bumped into Narancel, my new mage.
He'd been locked up in his room studying magic ever since he got here, and he was bored out of his bloody mind.
Narancel, any interest in being my administrator? I asked him straight up, but he shook his head right away.
I'm a researcher, not a bureaucrat, but I could train up some magic apprentices if you can track down some decent candidates. Sounded like a fair deal to me.
Those students needed top marks in strategy, and if possible,
some very special talents. Otherwise, dumping all that time and money into them just wouldn't be worth it. And here I was, back to my damn money problems. It's not like I could just pull another dwarf like Biglin out of thin air. His forging heritage made him completely unique and insanely valuable.
Your standard dwarf blacksmiths couldn't even touch his quality, and when winter hit, it hit bloody hard.
I figured hiring farmers for the winter would be enough to get by, but the castle's food reserves dropped to dangerously low levels.
And that's where we ended up. Trust me, the purge wiped out absolutely everything, and things are going to get incredibly messy.
Stick with me on this one. My butler actually reckoned we should cut the farmers' rations to save some coin. Absolutely out of the question.
I'd spent ages building up a reputation for unmatched strength and absolute kindness.
Backing out now would completely destroy all that hard-earned trust. Honestly, starting something and just chucking it in halfway through is way worse than never trying at all.
But I had the perfect fix. The snow-covered forest was absolutely crawling with rabbits, mice, and deer.
I sent out 1,000 soldiers armed with longbows. Turned out to be bloody good training too.
Between them and the local hunters, by the time winter wrapped up, the forest was pretty much stripped bare.
The hunters were in for a pretty short season, but hey, this territory had always been swarming with prey. I'd make sure we were way better prepared for next winter. I wasn't going to let this happen again. Finally, spring rolled around. I could actually breathe easy again.
I barely scraped by on my promise. We needed to plant a heap more wheat and stockpile food for the future.
Action and Anchor leveled up massively over the winter. Anchor hit level 79 and Anchor reached 75. Bloody incredible.
All 1,000 new soldiers hit level 40 just swinging heavy swords.
300 of them trained up as heavy cavalry. The only thing they were missing now was real combat experience.
With 0 bandits hanging around, there was no baptism of fire. Meanwhile, Saruka was making her way back to the Luika territory.
As soon as the snow melted enough to travel, she hopped in a carriage heading straight for Luika.
She was a fully certified advanced mage now, rocking her very own robes and a proper magic wand. Gifts from Aaliyah, of course. A small squad of elite guards escorted her, though she honestly didn't even need them.
A single advanced mage could easily wipe out hundreds of soldiers in an open field.
Her carriage didn't fly any family crest. Under Aaliyah's strict orders, nobody was allowed to connect Saruka to me.
That would only stir up a world of trouble. Eventually, she made it to the Luika territory.
She flashed the knight's badge I'd given her to the guards, and they waved her straight through. The two catgirls instantly tackled each other in a massive hug. Aquina's eyes were completely red from crying.
It was true. That timid, terrified little girl was long gone. Saruka was still as sweet as ever, but all that old insecurity had totally vanished from her eyes.
"Where's the master?" Saruka asked, peeking into my old rooms with burning curiosity.
"He's over at the new Luika territory, didn't you know?" Saruka's face instantly dropped.
Right, he wasn't just some kid anymore. He was a proper viscount now, with a massive second territory.
She'd already spent over a day travelling from the capital, and New Luika was even further out.
Her precious week off was quickly ticking away. Without missing a beat, she grabbed Aquina's hand. Now, pay attention to this part, because this is where things get messy. Without anyone knowing, a massive bloody disaster was brewing in the background.
Prince Michel. Yeah, that same annoying prick who'd been harassing Saruka all over the academy.
He was scheming up something way worse than some failed high school romance. His spies had tipped him off about a trip. He actually tried to follow her, but you can't just sneak up on an advanced mage without getting caught. But his real plan was something else entirely.
He was secretly meeting with Mon Reed, a beast priest from the Auto tribe, a vicious dog warrior with razor-sharp fangs and zero respect for the royals.
Michel was actually the exact bloke who
orchestrated the Duke's betrayal during the Autumn campaign, leaking key intel straight to Rima.
Since his old man survived, Michel had to regroup. His new grand scheme, take total control of Blackstone Fortress.
That massive defensive stronghold sitting right behind my new territory.
You and I both know exactly what that means. Whoever holds that fort essentially opens the floodgates for the Auto tribe to invade.
The Beastmen would march straight on the capital while Silic's forces were all tied up fighting in Rima. Michel reckoned his father and older brother would be completely wiped out before they could even blink.
Blackstone Fortress was just as bloody massive as George's great stronghold in Rima.
As long as those walls stood, the beasts could never threaten the capital.
And Michel was planning to hand it over on a silver platter. He didn't even spare a second thought for the minor border nobles, myself included.
The invasion was fully locked in for this coming April.
Of next year. Meanwhile, Vine just chilled peacefully in my territory for the entire winter.
I barely even visited, just kept busy training up the soldiers. So what kind of absolute madness is going to go down next? Guess you and I'll find out real soon.
Stick around, because this story is absolute madness. I made sure the kitchen staff remembered her exact preferences: unsalted potato soup and some seriously fluffy bread.
She definitely noticed those little details. Obviously, she ate a whole lot better back when she was the succubus empress, feasting on rare magical beasts, but she still really appreciated the gesture. She made up her mind that whenever I genuinely needed a hand, she'd pay back that exact same kindness.
But for the time being, she kept her distance. As the months rolled by, I started getting to know the crew that always hung around her.
There was Elialu, who was always trying to cook alongside her.
The brothers who could barely string a sentence together whenever she was around, and that dead silent half-elf mage, Naranel. Then spring rolled around, and along with it, 2 girls.
A cat girl I'd never laid eyes on before. Saruka rocked up and immediately latched right onto my arm.
Her tail kept wrapping around my calf and then loosening up. It was like she was pouring months of missing me into just that one simple touch.
Aquina tagged along too, finally catching up with Elialu after spending a long winter apart. Are you happy at the academy? I flat out asked little Saruka.
What I really wanted to know was if anyone had been giving her a hard time, but with Aaliyah as her teacher, that seemed pretty bloody unlikely.
I'm happy, she said, but nowhere near as happy as I'd be if I was with you. Now listen closely. I pulled up her status screen and nearly choked.
Saruka, Martial Level 10, Strategy 168, Rank S, Affinity 100, Magic.
Blessing of Wisdom, Great Traveller, Advanced Mage. Her strategy level had shot right up to an S rank, but her loyalty stat, that had completely changed into Affinity.
Exactly like Von's status screen. It was using a totally different metric now, and it was absolutely maxed out at 100. That explained why she was so desperate for physical contact. Back when she first left here, she was respectful and a bit on the shy side.
Now, she was practically glued to my arm, not giving a toss about who was watching us. You guys are thinking it too, aren't you? What on earth are they actually teaching them at that academy?
I had to be completely honest with myself. I never planned on catching feelings for Saruka, paying her tuition fees, or ever handing her a knighthood.
Every single one of those were incredibly calculated moves, just to lock down her loyalty. I was far from a good person.
I bought her off a slave trader with the sole intention of using her massive talents.
If she wasn't so gifted, she'd still be rotting away in some cage, but somehow things just kept taking these wildly unexpected turns.
Master, who is she? Saruka asked out of nowhere, glaring at Vidi. Vidi was pretty taken aback, but she managed to recover with total grace.
I'm Vidi, a slave the Viscount purchased. It's a real pleasure to meet you, Miss Saruka. And yep, Saruka actually called me master. How's that for some heavy tension, eh?
Come along, let's see how this all hits the fan. Biddy clocked it straight away. This cat girl wasn't just some run-of-the-mill slave, but an advanced mage with absolutely terrifying talent.
I could see Biddy's mind working overtime behind that calm little smirk of hers.
A mid-level elf mage living in my manor, a genius cat girl calling me master, and elite heavy cavalry standing guard out front.
This was a bloody far cry from your standard Viscount's estate.
She started wondering what sort of bloke I really was. To be honest, I was half expecting Saruka to try and sneak into my room again. She had a track record after all.
But what I didn't see coming was Alu getting in on the act. The two of them were parked at my door, hugging their pillows and looking proper pitiful.
I just rubbed my forehead and sighed. They reckoned they simply couldn't get a wink of sleep.
Saruka nodded, acting all spooked by the wind. Are you and I actually buying that? An advanced mage terrified of a breeze? Oh, give me a break.
Couldn't they have come up with a half-decent excuse?
I looked over at Ellie to get her side of the story. She said she just wanted to remember what it was like sleeping next to me when we were little. We were born on the exact same day and grew up together.
Up until we were 6, I could have sworn she was my sister. Then they dressed her up in a maid's uniform and it finally clicked that my old man had assigned it to me.
We stopped sharing a bed when we were 10. Both of them were undeniably gorgeous. Even a bloke like me, who's used to having attractive women around, had to admit they were absolutely my type.
Pay close attention here. I opened the door a crack and they both dashed in like little bunnies.
The bed was massive, so we all fit perfectly. Join me as we kick this off. I don't even know my own habits when I'm asleep, but with girls this stunning, you've got to make a few exceptions.
I was out like a light, totally consumed by my usual worries, and of course, I had an absolute nightmare.
Some
bloody hairy demon tied up my hands, feet, and neck until I couldn't breathe. Then I got chucked into the water with these slimy fish just rubbing all over my face non-stop.
Could you feel that sheer panic too? When the morning sun finally woke me up, I felt like a true survivor.
The girls were still dead to the world, and honestly, the way they were sprawled out was bloody impressive.
I really carefully wriggled my way out of that massive tangle of arms and legs squashing me. The head maid had already set up breakfast out in the lounge room.
Check this out. Toast with jam and Vidi and Akina were already sitting at the table waiting for us.
Come with me. Let's get stuck into this story. Aquina was just eating like normal, but she kept giving me this weird look, like she could actually see right through me.
It was the first time. Then Saruka and Lulu walked out of my room. The head maid didn't say a single word. Aquina's eyes went as wide as saucers. Apparently, this fit her stereotype of us nobles to a T.
I just sat there with a bit of an awkward grin. Honestly, I wasn't about to bother explaining that absolutely nothing happened.
And even if something did happen, I'm a noble sleeping in my own bed with my own maid. What's the fuss? No worries at all, right?
Saruka could only stick around for 2 more days before heading back. Her holidays were already up, and she was going to be a day late anyway.
I urgently needed to hit the books on magic to reach the level of a proper mage and become someone Alia would fully acknowledge.
Mark my words, that way she could come back to my side for good without having to ask anyone for permission.
I'm off, my love. She gave a little wave and hopped into her escorted carriage. I made the call to keep Aina right here, instead of sending her back to the Luika territory.
Count Pharaoh's 300 horses needed breaking in, and her knack with beasts was exactly what we needed. Then the butler brought up something pretty major.
My lord, the annual Golden Eagle Gladiator Tournament is coming up in 1 month.
Taking the win meant scoring the Golden Eagle Shield, free services, massive discounts at the top trading houses, and best of all, a huge personal favour straight from the king himself.
The exact same kind of shield my granddad Edward won, and the one I traded away. Plus, the tournament was strictly physical combat, absolutely zero magic allowed.
I know what you're thinking. Is he going to fight? Yeah, nah. I decided I wasn't going to enter a single soul.
They used to call my granddad the Sword Saint, and even he died in battle.
There's a hard limit to individual strength. Even the toughest dragons go down to squads of glory-hunting warriors, even if heaps of wannabe hunters bite the dust in the gruesome attempt. Building up a deadly army mattered way more to me than some flashy tournament win.
In a grim world where war could kick off at any second, collective military might is the only thing that'll save your skin.
Big heroic stunts were totally overrated. I was going to give that bloody tournament a hard pass.
You and I both know it was way better to spend that month training up the troops.